Highway 36, Denver, 8:47 a.m. A silver Mercedes flips, twice bursts into flames. Inside, a young woman trapped unconscious, bleeding gasoline, pooling fire spreading fast. Daniel Morrison has 30 seconds, maybe less. His choice: drive away safe to his 8-year-old daughter, or crawl into a burning car for a complete stranger. He chose courage. What he didn't know, that stranger would change his entire world. Because sometimes one moment of heroism doesn't just save a life, it reveals a destiny no one saw coming. This is that story. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and strawberry shampoo. Daniel Morrison stood at the kitchen counter, carefully writing on a small square of paper, while his daughter bounced around the living room, her rainbow backpack already strapped to her shoulders. "You're braver than you think. Love, Dad." He folded the note and tucked it into the plastic container next to the sandwich he'd cut into dinosaur shapes. The cookie cutter had been a purchase from the dollar store 2 years ago, right after Laura died, when he was desperately searching for ways to make Emma smile again. Small rituals, tiny anchors in a world that had tilted sideways. "Daddy, I'm going to be late." Emma appeared in the doorway, all freckles and wild brown hair that refused to cooperate, no matter how many times he tried to brush it. She was 8 years old and already smarter than him in ways that both terrified and amazed him. "We have 10 minutes, sweetheart. Plenty of time." He closed the lunchbox and handed it to her, watching as she immediately opened it to check for the note. She always checked. "You know I keep these, right?" Emma looked up at him with those serious brown eyes, so much like Laura's, it sometimes hurt to breathe. "I know. I have like 100 now, in a shoebox under my bed. I'll keep writing them, even when I'm in high school, especially then." Emma grinned and threw her arms around his waist. Daniel knelt down to her level breathing in the strawberry scent of her hair. She'd insisted on shampooing twice this morning, which meant she was nervous about something. Maybe the math test she'd mentioned yesterday. Maybe just the general anxiety that lived in children who'd already learned the world could take people away without warning. "Promise you'll pick me up today." Her voice was small, muffled against his shoulder. "Always, sweetheart. Love you to the moon." And back again. "Daddy." She pulled away and skipped toward the door, her backpack bouncing with each step. Daniel watched from the doorway as she joined the stream of children heading toward the school entrance. She turned back once, waved with her whole arm, and disappeared inside. He stood there longer than necessary, watching the doors where she'd vanished. The familiar ache settled in his chest, the one that never quite left. Laura should have been here for this. Should have been the one writing lunch notes and braiding hair and kissing scraped knees. Instead, it was just him doing his best not to mess up the one perfect thing they'd created together. The morning air was cool against his face as he walked to his truck. Autumn in Denver meant the mountains were starting to wear their first dusting of snow, visible in the distance when the smog cleared. He had 40 minutes to get to Paramount Technologies' clock-in and start his shift fixing whatever had broken overnight in a building full of people who barely noticed he existed. Daniel turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot, thinking about Emma's promise. "You'll pick me up today," and wondering why it felt different this morning, why it felt like a question instead of a routine. He had no way of knowing that in 47 minutes he'd be making a choice that would change everything. The screech of tires on wet asphalt cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the silver Mercedes ahead of him suddenly swerved violently to the left. A deer, brown and graceful and completely oblivious to the chaos it was causing, bounded across Highway 36 and disappeared into the tree line as quickly as it had appeared. The luxury car wasn't so lucky. Time did that thing it does in moments of crisis, stretching like taffy pulled too thin each second, expanding into something grotesque and surreal. Daniel watched, unable to look away as the Mercedes lost its grip on the rain-slicked road. The vehicle spun sideways, tires screaming against the asphalt smoke rising from the rubber as physics and momentum fought for control. The car lost. Metal met concrete with a sound Daniel would hear in his dreams for months. The impact was devastating, immediate, final. The driver's side crumpled inward like a tin can in a vice glass, exploding outward in a shower of glittering shards that caught the morning light. The car flipped. Once. Twice. A terrible ballet of destruction that seemed to defy gravity before the vehicle finally crashed back to Earth, landing upright in a mangled heap of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Daniel's Ford pickup skidded to a stop on the shoulder, his heart hammering so hard against his ribs he could feel it in his throat. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, fingers fumbling with the screen. "What's your emergency?" "There's been an accident on Highway 36 eastbound about 2 miles past the Paramount Technologies exit." His voice came out surprisingly steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "A car hit the barrier, flipped multiple times. I can see someone inside." "Sir, are you injured?" "No, but—" Daniel stopped mid-sentence. Smoke was beginning to rise from beneath the crumpled hood of the Mercedes. Not the white steam of a damaged radiator, but something darker, something that made his stomach drop. "Sir, are you there?" He ended the call and ran. Each step toward the wreckage felt like moving through quicksand. His mind screamed at him to stop, to wait for the professionals to think about Emma waiting for him at 3:30. But his body kept moving forward, pulled by something deeper than logic or self-preservation. The closer he got, the worse it looked. The driver's side had taken the brunt of the impact, the door frame compressed inward so severely there was no way it would open. Inside he could see a young woman, maybe 25, hanging unconscious against her seatbelt. Blood trickled down her forehead from a gash near her hairline, following the curve of her face like crimson tears. Her left arm was bent at an angle that made Daniel's stomach turn. "Miss," he shouted, pulling at the driver's door handle. It wouldn't budge. "Can you hear me?" No response. Her breathing was shallow. Labored, the kind of breathing that said broken ribs or collapsed lung or internal bleeding or all of the above. Then the smell hit him. Gasoline. Sweet and sharp and absolutely terrifying. Daniel looked down. Dark fluid was pooling beneath the vehicle, spreading outward like spilled ink on paper. The engine made ominous clicking sounds, the kind of sounds that preceded very bad things. Small orange flames began to lick at the edges of the hood, tentative at first, then growing bolder. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Daniel stood frozen. He thought about Emma. "Love you to the moon, Daddy. And back again, sweetheart." Their morning goodbye echoed in his mind. Emma with her rainbow backpack skipping toward the school entrance, without a care in the world, completely trusting that her daddy would come home safe. Emma, who'd already lost her mother to a brain aneurysm 2 years ago. Emma, who would be completely alone if something happened to him. The flames grew larger, hungrily consuming whatever fuel source they'd found. Smoke began to fill the interior of the car through the crushed dashboard vents. Daniel ran back to his truck and grabbed the tire iron from behind the seat. Glass showered everywhere as he smashed the rear passenger window of the Mercedes, the sound of breaking glass mixing with the growing roar of fire under the hood. Heat hit him immediately as he crawled through the window frame, wave after wave of it, making his eyes water and his lungs burn. Smoke filled the interior thick and black and choking. The woman's seatbelt was jammed, the metal clasp twisted from the impact. Daniel pulled out his pocket knife, the last anniversary gift Laura had given him before she died, and started sawing through the thick fabric of the seatbelt. The blade caught and slipped with each desperate cut. Come on, come on. The flames were visible through the dashboard vents now, orange tongues of fire reaching toward the interior like grasping fingers. His jacket sleeve caught fire, and he beat it out with his bleeding hands, never stopping his work on the seatbelt, never pausing, never giving up. The belt finally gave way with a sound like mercy. The woman's head lolled to one side as Daniel caught her weight against his chest, her body limp and frighteningly still. Blood from her head wound soaked into his shirt as he dragged her toward the back seat. Every movement an exercise in controlled panic. Getting her through the rear window was like trying to thread a needle while wearing boxing gloves in the dark during an earthquake. Daniel's back scraped against jagged glass as he pulled her through, tearing through his shirt and skin. The heat was overwhelming now, blistering the skin on his neck and arms, making it hard to think, hard to breathe, hard to do anything except keep moving. They were 5 feet from the car when Daniel heard it, a low whooshing sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. He threw himself forward, covering the woman's body with his own, just as the gas tank exploded. The force of the blast lifted them both off the ground. Daniel felt debris rain down on his back, sharp pieces of metal and glass embedding themselves in his shoulders and arms. The heat was like standing too close to a furnace, like the air itself was on fire. When the ringing in his ears finally subsided, Daniel found himself lying in the grass 10 feet from where the car had been. The woman was beneath him, still unconscious but breathing. He rolled off her carefully, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through his body. The Mercedes was nothing but a twisted skeleton of charred metal, now flames still dancing among the wreckage. Daniel pressed his jacket against the woman's head wound, his burned hands trembling with adrenaline and shock. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. "Help is coming. Just hold on." In the distance, sirens wailed, getting closer. The world narrowed to a single point of focus, keep her breathing. Daniel knelt in the wet grass beside the unconscious woman, his jacket pressed against her head, wound, watching the rise and fall of her chest, with an intensity that made everything else fade to background noise. Blood seeped through the fabric, despite the pressure he was applying. His hands, raw with burns and embedded with glass, trembled from adrenaline and shock. The heat from the burning car reached him even here, 10 feet away, waves of it washing over his back where debris had torn through his shirt. He could feel moisture there, warm and sticky, that was probably blood. Probably his own. But he couldn't think about that. Couldn't think about the pain screaming through his nervous system or the fact that he might have just made Emma an orphan. All that mattered was this stranger's shallow breathing, the barely perceptible pulse he could feel beneath his burned fingers when he checked her neck, the way her eyelids fluttered occasionally, as if she was trying to swim up from deep water toward consciousness, but couldn't quite break the surface. "Thank you." The words were so quiet, Daniel almost missed them. Her lips had barely moved, her eyes still closed, but he'd heard it, clear as a bell, clear as a promise that she was still in there, still fighting. And somehow in that moment, Daniel knew Laura would have been proud. The paramedics found them like that. Daniel hunched over the unconscious woman, talking to her softly, even though she couldn't hear him, his body creating a shield between her and the burning wreckage, telling her about Emma, about how his daughter collected rocks and believed in magic, and had the biggest heart of anyone he'd ever known, about how she'd lost her mother, but still found reasons to smile every single day. He didn't know why he was telling this stranger these things. Maybe because talking kept him from passing out. Maybe because if he stopped talking, he'd have to acknowledge the pain. Maybe because Laura used to say that hearing was the last sense to go, and if this woman died, he wanted her last moments to be filled with stories about hope, instead of the sound of flames consuming metal. "So you need to let us take a look at you." The voice belonged to a young paramedic with kind eyes and steady hands. Daniel looked up at him, momentarily disoriented. When had the ambulance arrived? How much time had passed? Take care of her first. His voice came out raspy from smoke, inhalation, barely more than a whisper. Sir, please. Daniel's eyes never left the woman's face. She was young, he realized now that he could actually see her. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair matted with blood. Pale skin going paler by the second. Someone's daughter. Someone's friend. Someone who'd woken up this morning with plans that definitely didn't include nearly burning to death on Highway 36. Make sure she's okay first. It took 3 paramedics to convince Daniel to step back while they worked. As they loaded the woman into the ambulance, he caught a glimpse of her purse, its contents scattered across the wet asphalt. A driver's license, credit cards. A photo of an older man with silver hair and kind eyes smiling at the camera with his arm around the young woman, both of them laughing at some private joke. The name on the license read, Rachel Bennett. Bennett. Like Bennett. Like Paramount Technologies, where Daniel had been working as a maintenance supervisor for the past 5 years. But the connection didn't register through the fog of shock and adrenaline. All that mattered was that she was breathing. That the paramedics were saying words like stable and responsive. What's your name, sir? Daniel Harrison Morrison, he said automatically. Then quieter. Is she going to be okay? The second paramedic, a woman with gentle hands who'd been cleaning the glass from his palms, paused in her work. You saved her life, Mr. Morrison, but you also nearly got yourself killed doing it. These burns are serious. Daniel nodded absently, watching the ambulance pull away with Rachel Bennett inside. Only then did he allow himself to think about Emma, about the phone call he'd have to make to his sister Beth, about how close he'd come to not coming home. How do you tell an 8-year-old that her daddy might have scars for the rest of his life because he couldn't drive past a stranger in trouble? The emergency room at Denver General was a blur of activity and fluorescent lights. Daniel sat on an examination table while Dr. Sarah Chen worked on his hands, carefully removing pieces of glass and debris from his palms and fingers. Each shard she extracted felt like a small betrayal evidence of how close he'd come to failing Emma, the way death had failed to warn them before taking Laura. You're lucky. Dr. Chen's voice was professional but warm, the kind of warmth that suggested she'd given bad news to too many families and took genuine pleasure in being able to offer good news for once. The burns on your back are 2nd degree, but they should heal without permanent damage to muscle function. Your hands, though, you're going to need surgery on 3 fingers. There's significant nerve damage. Daniel watched her work his mind elsewhere. Somewhere between this sterile room and Highway 36, between this moment and the one where he'd made his choice. The woman from the accident. Rachel Bennett. Is she? She's alive because of you, Mr. Morrison. Dr. Chen's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Skull fracture, broken arm, some internal bleeding, but nothing that won't heal. The fire department said you had maybe 30 seconds before that car became a death trap. 30 seconds. Daniel closed his eyes and tried not to think about how many times in those 30 seconds he'd almost turned around and walked away, almost chosen safety over courage, almost decided that Emma needed her father more than a stranger needed rescue. Mr. Morrison. Dr. Chen's voice gentled. Is there someone we can call family my sister Beth? He gave her the number, his voice cracking slightly. And my daughter's school. Emma, she's 8. I was supposed to pick her up at 3:30. The medication was making everything feel distant and strange, like he was watching his life through a fogged window. But the thought of Emma waiting for him at school, watching the other kids get picked up one by one until she was the last one left, brought everything into sharp, painful focus. We'll take care of that, Dr. Chen assured him. But you're going to be here for a while, Surgery, observation, physical therapy. This isn't something you recover from in a day or two. Daniel nodded, staring down at his bandaged hands. 2 weeks ago, his biggest worry was whether he could afford to fix the water heater in their apartment. Now he was looking at medical bills that would probably cost more than he made in 6 months. But she's alive, he told himself. Rachel Bennett is alive. That had to be enough. Beth Anderson arrived 20 minutes later with Emma in tow, her face pale with worry and poorly concealed fear. Daniel saw them through the small window in his examination room door before they saw him, and his heart broke a little at the expression on his daughter's face. Emma looked small and scared, in a way she hadn't since the first terrible weeks after Laura died. "Uncle Danny's here, sweetie. He's okay." Beth's voice was pitched for reassurance, but Daniel could hear the tremor underneath. The door opened, and Emma launched herself toward the hospital bed before Beth could stop her, then pulled up short when she saw the bandages covering her father's arms. Her brown eyes went wide, filling with tears she was trying desperately not to shed. "What happened to you?" Daniel looked at his daughter, all freckles and worried brown eyes and tangled hair from the playground, and felt his heart break into smaller pieces than he'd thought possible. How did you explain to a child that sometimes adults had to make choices between safety and doing what was right? How did you help her understand that the world required both caution and courage, and knowing which one to choose was the hardest part of being human? "I helped someone who was hurt, sweetheart." He kept his voice gentle, steady. "But I'm okay. I'm going to be okay." Emma climbed carefully onto the bed beside him, her small body radiating warmth as she pressed against his side, avoiding his bandaged hands with the careful precision of a child who understood that Daddy was fragile right now. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted, because he'd learned after Laura died that honesty was better than false comfort. Children could sense lies the way animals could sense earthquakes, and Emma had already had enough of her world shaken to its foundations. But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared, like how you took care of me after Mommy went to heaven. Daniel's throat tightened. Emma only talked about Laura in whispers, usually late at night when the dreams were bad and the dark felt too heavy. Hearing her mention it so matter-of-factly was both heartbreaking and hopeful, like watching a wound close over scar tissue. Painful but necessary. Progress. "Yeah, baby, just like that." Beth squeezed his shoulder, her touch careful of his injuries. The school called. "You missed work. Have you called Tom yet?" Tom Reynolds, his supervisor at Paramount Technologies. A good man who'd been patient when Daniel needed time off after Laura's death, who'd let him adjust his schedule to accommodate Emma's needs, who'd looked the other way when Daniel showed up late, because parent-teacher conferences ran long, or because Emma had woken up crying from nightmares and needed extra time to feel safe again. But patience had limits. Missing 2 weeks for medical recovery was one thing. Missing work because you'd nearly killed yourself saving a stranger was another thing entirely. "I'll call him tomorrow," Daniel said, his eyes drifting closed despite his best efforts to stay present. "Right now, I just want to go home." But even as he said it, he knew home was changed now. That this decision, this choice to stop instead of drive past, had altered something fundamental in the architecture of their lives. He could feel it in the weight of Emma's head against his chest, in the careful way Beth was looking at him like he was a stranger wearing her brother's face, in the ache of his burned hands and the knowledge that some scars ran deeper than skin. Emma settled herself more comfortably against him and pulled out her coloring book, the one with pictures of superheroes that she insisted all looked exactly like her daddy, even though Daniel had pointed out multiple times that he was neither 6 feet tall nor capable of flight. As she colored her tongue poking out the side of her mouth in concentration, Daniel lay in that hospital bed watching his daughter, and couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. Not just in his body with the burns and cuts that would leave permanent scars, but in his understanding of who he was and what he was capable of. Laura used to say that love meant showing up for people even when it cost you everything. Daniel had always thought she was talking about family, about the way you take care of your wife and daughter no matter what. He'd never considered that sometimes love meant showing up for complete strangers, for people whose names you didn't know, whose stories you'd never hear, whose gratitude you might never receive. But watching Emma carefully color Superman's cape in precise strokes of red, so focused on making something beautiful despite the worry he could see in the tension of her small shoulders, Daniel thought maybe that was the most important lesson Laura had tried to teach him. That love didn't have boundaries. That showing up mattered regardless of whether the person you were showing up for was family or friend or complete stranger trapped in a burning car. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified him. Because if love meant always showing up, always choosing courage over safety, always putting others before self-preservation, then how many more times would he put Emma at risk of losing her last remaining parent? He didn't have an answer. But as Emma climbed onto his lap, her artwork clutched in her small hands, showing him the picture she'd colored of a hero who looked nothing like him, but everything like hope. Daniel thought maybe the answer didn't matter as much as the question. Maybe courage wasn't about having the right answers. Maybe it was about being brave enough to keep asking the questions even when you were terrified of what the answers might cost you. That night, after Beth had taken Emma home and the nurses had dimmed the lights and the hospital settled into its strange nocturnal rhythm of beeping machines and hushed conversations, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling tiles and counting all the ways he'd almost orphaned his daughter. The choice to run toward the burning car instead of away, the moment his sleeve caught fire, the seconds he'd spent sawing through that seatbelt while flames reached toward him, the explosion that could have killed them both if he'd been even a foot closer. 30 seconds. Dr. Chen had said he'd had 30 seconds. But Daniel kept replaying those moments in his mind, stretching and compressing them like taffy, trying to find the exact instant when he'd made his decision, when he'd chosen a stranger's life over his daughter's security. He couldn't find it. Couldn't pinpoint the moment when instinct had overridden logic, when compassion had trumped self-preservation. 1 second he was standing by his truck, frozen by fear and uncertainty. The next, he was smashing a window with a tire iron, crawling into smoke and fire, making choices that could have left Emma completely alone in the world. His phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text from Beth. Emma finally asleep. Asked me 3 times if you were really okay. Said you promised to pick her up today, and you always keep your promises. Guilt hit him like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. He'd promised. Love you to the moon, Daddy. And back again, sweetheart. Their morning ritual sacred and unbreakable. Except he'd almost broken it. Almost made that goodbye their last goodbye. Daniel typed back with his bandaged hands, the movement awkward and painful. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll be home soon. Beth's response was immediate. She knows. But Danny, you scared her. You scared me. What were you thinking? What had he been thinking? That someone needed help? That Laura would have wanted him to stop? That teaching Emma about courage meant sometimes being courageous yourself, even when every cell in your body screamed to run the other way? I was thinking about being the kind of father Emma deserves, he typed back. The kind of man Laura fell in love with. Beth didn't respond for a long time. When she finally did, her message was simple. Laura fell in love with Emma's father, the man who came home to his family every night. Don't forget that part. Daniel set the phone down, Beth's words echoing in his mind. She was right. Laura had loved him not because he was heroic or brave or willing to run into burning cars. She'd loved him because he showed up, because he was present, because when she'd gotten sick and the doctors had said there was nothing they could do, he'd held her hand and promised to take care of their daughter no matter what. And he had. For 2 years he'd kept that promise. He'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. He'd burned countless dinners and ordered too much pizza and cried in the shower so Emma wouldn't hear. He'd attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every doctor's appointment. He'd been enough even when he felt like he was failing. But now he had scars that would remind him every day of the choice he'd made. The choice that could have broken his promise to Laura, could have left Emma alone. The door to his room opened quietly. Daniel expected a nurse come to check his vitals or adjust his medication. Instead, Emma slipped inside, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand, Beth's apologetic face visible in the hallway behind her. She insisted, Beth mouthed. Emma climbed onto the chair beside his bed, her small face serious in the dim light. She was wearing her pajamas, the ones with stars that Laura had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. They were getting too small now, the sleeves riding up her arms, but Emma refused to let them go. "I had a bad dream," Emma said quietly. "About you not coming home." Daniel's heart clenched. "I'm right here, sweetheart. But you almost weren't." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact in that way children have stating truths adults try to hide. "Auntie Beth said you saved someone, that you went into a fire to help them." "I did." "Were you scared? Terrified?" Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. "Then did you think about me?" "Every second," Daniel said, "and it was the absolute truth. I thought about our goodbye this morning. About your rainbow backpack. About how much I wanted to hear you say, 'Love you' to the moon again. Did that make you scared? Scared to help?" "It made me scared. I might not come home to you. But it also made me careful, made me pay attention to every second because I had to come back." Emma climbed onto the bed beside him, settling herself carefully against his side. Her rabbit ended up squished between them, its button eyes reflecting the dim light. "Mommy didn't get to choose, Emma," said finally. Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way that made Daniel's throat tight. "When she went to heaven, she didn't choose to leave us. No, baby, she didn't. But you chose to go into that fire. You could have died, and that would have been a choice." Daniel had no answer for that. Because she was right. He had chosen, had weighed the risks and made his decision, and nearly orphaned his daughter in the process. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Emma was quiet for a long time. "Then I'm not. You're not." She shook her head, her hair tickling his chin. "Because if you'd driven past, you wouldn't be my daddy anymore." Daniel's chest tightened. "Emma, I'll always be your daddy." "No," she said firmly. "You'd be the man who used to be my daddy, the one who taught me to help people and be brave and show up when things are hard. If you'd driven past that lady, you would have become someone else, someone scared. And I don't want a scared daddy. I want the brave one." Tears slipped down Daniel's face, hot and unexpected. When had his 8-year-old become so wise? When had she learned to see through his fear and guilt, to the truth underneath? Emma reached up and wiped his tears with her small hand. "It's okay to cry, Daddy. Mommy said crying means you care about things." She was right about that. Laura had been right about most things. They lay there together in the dim hospital room, father and daughter, both of them learning what it meant to be brave, to be scared and brave at the same time, to make impossible choices and live with the consequences, to love deeply enough that the thought of loss was terrifying, but the alternative not loving at all was worse. Eventually, Emma fell asleep against his chest, her breathing deep and even. Beth appeared in the doorway, ready to take her home, but Daniel shook his head. Let her stay, just for tonight. Because tomorrow he'd have to be strong again. Have to make phone calls and deal with medical bills and figure out how to work with hands that might never fully heal. But tonight, he could hold his daughter and be grateful that he'd made it back to her, that he'd had 30 seconds of courage when it mattered most, that he'd become, at least for one morning on Highway 36, the kind of man his daughter believed him to be. 3 days later, in the hospital, Daniel stared at his bandaged hands trying to grip a spoon. The occupational therapist had left him a children's fork, the kind with a fat rubber handle that Emma used when she was 3. His pride stung worse than the burns. The door opened. Emma peeked in her backpack, still on from school. "Daddy, can I help?" Daniel wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her that daddies were supposed to take care of daughters, not the other way around. But the truth was simpler and harder. "Yeah, baby. I'd like that." Emma climbed onto the hospital bed, careful of his IV line, and picked up the spoon. One bite at a time, she fed him applesauce, her small face serious with concentration. "You're really good at this," Daniel said. "Auntie Beth taught me. She said sometimes people who love us need help, and that's okay." Daniel felt tears burning behind his eyes. "When did you get so smart?" "I was always smart," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You just noticed." Later, after Beth had taken Emma home and the sun had set beyond his hospital window, a nurse brought Daniel's dinner. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans that had been cooked into submission. Standard hospital fare that required utensils to eat. Daniel stared at the tray, then at his bandaged hands, and felt frustration rise like bile in his throat. He picked up the adaptive fork, tried to stab a piece of meatloaf, and watched it slide across the plate. His fingers wouldn't close properly, wouldn't maintain the grip necessary for something as simple as eating dinner. The fork clattered against the tray again. Daniel wanted to throw it across the room, wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. He'd saved someone's life, and this was his reward. Hands that didn't work, nerve damage that might be permanent, the inability to do basic tasks without assistance. "Need some help with that?" The voice came from the doorway. Daniel looked up to find Tom Reynolds, his supervisor from Paramount Technologies, standing there with an uncertain expression. Tom was a big man, built like the linebacker he'd been in college, but his presence in the hospital room somehow made him seem smaller, more vulnerable. Tom. Daniel tried to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing burns. "I was going to call you. To explain about work." Tom waved a hand dismissively and walked into the room, settling his bulk into the visitor's chair. "I'm not here about work, Danny. I'm here because I heard what you did, and I wanted to see how you were holding up." "I'm fine," Daniel lied automatically. Tom looked pointedly at the untouched dinner tray, at the adaptive utensils, at the bandages covering Daniel's hands. "You're a terrible liar. Always have been." They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel could hear the hospital sounds filtering through his door, the beeping of monitors, the soft conversations of nurses, the distant ring of phones at the nurses' station. All the machinery of healing moving forward, regardless of how he felt about it. "The woman you saved," Tom said finally. "Rachel Bennett. She's Robert Bennett's daughter." Daniel's brain took a moment to process that information. Robert Bennett. As in the CEO of Paramount Technologies, the man whose name was on the building, whose photo hung in the lobby, who Daniel had never met in 5 years of working there. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Course you didn't." Tom leaned back in the chair, which creaked under his weight. "You ran into a burning car without knowing who she was or what she was worth. Just knew she needed help, and you were the person standing there. Anyone would have done it." "No," Tom said firmly. "They really wouldn't have. Most people would have called 911 and waited. Kept themselves safe." protected their families by not taking unnecessary risks. You're not most people, Danny. Never have been. Daniel thought about Emma feeding him applesauce, about Laura in those final moments making him promise to take care of their daughter, about all the ways he'd almost broken that promise for a stranger he'd never met. I have a daughter, he said. I should have thought about her first. You did think about her. Tom's voice was gentle but firm. You thought about the kind of man you wanted her father to be, the kind of example you wanted to set. That's thinking about your kid Danny, just in a different way than you expected. The meatloaf was getting cold. Daniel looked at it, at the adaptive fork at his hands that didn't work the way they were supposed to. Tom followed his gaze. Want me to cut that for you? Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. But then he thought about Emma's words. Sometimes people who love us need help, and that's okay. He nodded. Tom stood and methodically cut the meatloaf into bite-sized pieces, his large hands surprisingly dexterous. There. Should be easier now. Thanks. Daniel managed to eat most of his dinner, the adaptive fork slowly becoming less foreign in his damaged hands. Tom stayed talking about work and Emma and anything except the accident. The gift of normalcy, when Daniel felt like nothing about his life would ever be normal again. As Tom prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Robert Bennett called me personally, asked about you, about Emma, about whether you needed anything. I don't need anything from the CEO. That's not what I asked. Tom's expression was serious now. He wants to meet you, Danny, to thank you for saving his daughter's life. You might want to think about saying yes. After Tom left, Daniel lay in his hospital bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about choices and consequences, about how one decision on a rain-slicked highway had rippled outward in ways he never could have anticipated, how 30 seconds had somehow connected him to people he'd never met, created debts and obligations he didn't know how to navigate. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma sent from Beth's phone, "Good night, Daddy. Love you to the moon." He typed back awkwardly with his bandaged hands, and back again, sweetheart, always, always. The word felt like a promise and a prayer, a reminder that some things remained constant even when everything else changed, that love persisted despite pain, despite scars, despite hands that didn't work right, and choices that cost more than you expected to pay. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could see was fire and smoke and a stranger's face as he pulled her from certain death. All he could feel was the weight of decisions made in 30 seconds that would echo through the rest of his life. Tomorrow he'd start physical therapy in earnest. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to hold a wrench with reconstructed fingers. Tomorrow he'd begin the long process of recovery. But tonight, he just held on to always and hoped it was enough. Week 2 after the accident. Physical therapy. The foam ball sat on the table between them like an accusation. It was designed for children, soft and squeezable and bright blue. The kind of thing Emma would have played with when she was 3, squeezing it with delight just to watch it compress and expand. Daniel stared at it like it was a mountain he had to climb. Squeeze. Hold for 5. Release. Rachel Peterson's voice was patient but firm. She was his physical therapist. A woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and absolutely no tolerance for self-pity. They'd been working together for 6 days now. 6 days of Daniel trying and failing to make his reconstructed fingers cooperate with basic commands from his brain. He gripped the ball. Or tried to. His fingers barely indented the surface. Pain shot through his hand, sharp and electric, following the path of damaged nerves from fingertips to wrist. The surgery had been successful, the doctors said. The repairs were holding. But nerve healing was slow, unpredictable, measured in millimeters per day rather than dramatic improvements. I can't. His voice came out harsh with frustration. Rachel moved his fingers into the correct position, her touch gentle but unyielding. You can. You saved someone's life with these hands. They're not broken. They're healing. Daniel thought about the Mercedes, about sawing through a seatbelt while fire licked at his sleeve, about hands that had worked perfectly when they needed to, when Rachel Bennett's life had depended on their function. Now those same hands couldn't squeeze a children's toy. Again, he said through gritted teeth. This time the ball compressed. Just a little. Just barely. Just enough that Rachel's face broke into a genuine smile. That's it. That's progress, Mr. Morrison. Daniel released the ball, his hand trembling from the effort. He'd done construction work. He'd lifted equipment that weighed more than Emma. He'd worked 14-hour shifts without complaint, his hands reliable tools that responded to every command without hesitation. Now squeezing a foam ball felt like running a marathon. And this was just the beginning. Your daughter was here yesterday, Rachel said, as she adjusted his hand position for another attempt. She's quite something. She is. Daniel felt his chest tighten with love and guilt. She brought me a card she made, drew pictures of us fishing. Do you fish used to? Before Laura got sick. Daniel paused, surprised he'd mentioned his wife. He didn't usually talk about Laura with strangers. Haven't been since she died. Rachel nodded, not pushing, and Daniel found himself continuing. Laura loved fishing. Hated baiting the hook, loved everything else about it. Said it was the only time she could make her brain slow down and just be present. Sounds like a special person. She was. Daniel looked at his damaged hands, at the scars, still pink and healing. She would have told me I was an idiot for running into that fire. Then she would have been proud of me for it anyway. That's who she was. Rachel handed him the ball again. Sounds like she understood that sometimes being an idiot and being brave look exactly the same. They worked for another 30 minutes. Squeeze, hold, release. Over and over until Daniel's hand cramped and sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort and frustration. But each squeeze was minutely better than the last, each compression a fraction deeper, progress measured in millimeters. Recovery counted in foam ball squeezes. After therapy, Daniel returned to his hospital room to find Beth waiting with news. The doctor says you can go home tomorrow. If you have adequate support for daily care, I'll manage. Beth gave him the look, the one that said she loved him, but thought he was being an idiot. Danny, you can't button your own shirt. How are you going to manage? I'll figure it out. You're staying with me for at least a week. Until you can handle basic tasks independently. Beth's voice left no room for argument. Emma's already excited. She's been planning your homecoming for days. Daniel wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of independence, but the truth was he couldn't manage alone. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. Okay. Thank you. Beth's expression softened. That's what family does. We show up for each other. After she left, Daniel attempted to button his hospital gown. His fingers fumbled with the small buttons, unable to grip them properly, unable to push them through the buttonholes. 5 minutes of trying left him exhausted and frustrated, the gown still hanging open. The door opened. Daniel expected a nurse, and instead found himself looking at a young woman in a wheelchair. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her left arm in a cast, and bandages still visible on her forehead, where Daniel remembered seeing blood. Her eyes were alert and focused, and they were staring at him with an intensity that made him forget how to breathe. Mr. Morrison. Her voice was soft but clear. I'm Rachel Bennett. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. This was the woman he'd pulled from the burning car. The stranger he'd risked everything to save. Conscious now, alive, looking at him like he was something more than human, instead of just a man who'd made an impulsive decision. "I wanted to thank you," Rachel continued. She maneuvered her wheelchair closer with practiced ease. "For my life. For everything. I just did what anyone would do." "No." Rachel's voice was firm. Most people would have driven past, would have called for help and kept themselves safe. You didn't. You ran toward fire. For me. A complete stranger. They looked at each other across the small hospital room. Daniel saw tears gathering in Rachel's eyes, saw the weight of what had almost happened written in the set of her shoulders. "I don't know how to thank you for that," she whispered. "How do you thank someone for your life?" "You just did," Daniel said. "And you don't have to. I'm just glad you're okay." Rachel smiled through her tears. "My father wants to meet you. He's been trying to find the right time, the right way to say thank you. He's not good with emotions, but he's been crying every day since the accident. I've never seen him cry before." Daniel thought about Tom's visit, about Robert Bennett calling personally. The CEO whose name was on the building whose daughter was alive because of 30 seconds of courage. "You don't owe me anything. Neither does your father. We owe you everything," Rachel said simply. "But I understand if you need time, if this is all overwhelming." She gestured to his hands, to the hospital room, to the weight of everything that had happened. "I just needed to see you, to say thank you in person, to tell you that I remember." Remember what Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You talking to me, while you were pulling me out. You told me about your daughter, about Emma, how she loves rocks and believes in magic, how she lost her mother but still finds reasons to smile. I was unconscious, but I heard you. Your voice was the only thing keeping me anchored." Daniel's throat tightened. "I didn't know you could hear me. I could, and it mattered, more than you know." Rachel wheeled closer and took his damaged hand in her good one, her touch gentle on his bandaged fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for seeing me when you could have looked away, for choosing courage when safety was the easier option, for giving my father more time with his daughter." She released his hand and maneuvered her wheelchair toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "My father would like to meet you tomorrow. At his office, if you're well enough. No pressure, no expectations. Just a conversation between two people whose lives are connected now, whether we planned for it or not." After she left, Daniel sat on his hospital bed and stared at his hands. These broken, damaged, healing hands that had saved a life and cost him so much. He thought about Rachel's words about being heard while unconscious, about voices anchoring us when we're drowning. He thought about Emma making cards about fishing trips they hadn't taken yet. About Laura saying sometimes being an idiot and being brave look the same. About 30 seconds that had connected him to people and purposes larger than he'd ever imagined. Tomorrow he'd meet a CEO. Tomorrow he'd navigate conversations about gratitude and debt and obligations he didn't fully understand. But tonight, he'd managed to squeeze a foam ball. Tonight, recovery was measured in millimeters, and that was enough. Progress, Rachel, the therapist, had said. That's progress. And maybe Daniel thought as he finally managed to button one button on his hospital gown, maybe millimeters were how you measured courage too. One small choice at a time. One squeeze. One button. One day. One life saved and many more changed in the process. 4 months after the accident. Daniel was home now, mostly healed, the pink scars on his hands and back, serving as permanent reminders of that morning on Highway 36. Emma had adapted to having her father back, had stopped asking every morning if he promised to come home, had started sleeping through the night again, without nightmares about fires and ambulances and empty houses. Or so Daniel had thought. He woke at midnight to the sound of soft crying coming from Emma's room, the kind of crying that was trying hard to stay quiet, muffled into a pillow, so as not to disturb anyone. Daniel's heart clenched as he got out of bed and padded down the hallway. Emma was sitting at her small desk homework, spread out in front of her, but clearly untouched. She was staring at the family photo on the wall beside her bed. The one from before. Before Mommy went to heaven. Before Daddy got hurt saving people. The one where they were just a normal family at the beach, frozen in a moment of uncomplicated happiness. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Emma looked up, her face blotchy and wet with tears. "I had a bad dream. About the fire. About you not coming home." Daniel crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, ignoring the protest from his healing back. "But I did come home." Emma's bottom lip trembled. "What if next time you don't? What if next time you help someone and you don't come back and I'm all alone forever?" The fear Daniel had been trying to protect her from, the one he'd thought she'd moved past, sat between them now, like a living thing. He'd been fooling himself, thinking 4 months was enough time for an 8-year-old to process the reality that her father had almost died. That she'd almost lost both parents within 2 years. "Come here, baby." Daniel moved to sit on her bed, and Emma immediately crawled into his lap, curling against him like she used to do when she was much smaller. Her small body trembled with suppressed sobs. "I heard you and Auntie Beth talking last week," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "She said you could have died, that you were really lucky, and I already don't have a mummy, and if you died too, I'd be all alone forever." Daniel felt his own throat tighten, tears burning behind his eyes. She was right. She was absolutely right. He'd made a choice that could have orphaned her, and no amount of noble intentions could change that fundamental truth. "Emma, look at me." He waited until her brown eyes, so much like Laura's, met his. "I'm right here. I'm okay. I'm not going anywhere." "But you almost did go somewhere. You almost left me like Mommy did." And there it was. The fear he'd been too focused on his own recovery to notice. The terror of an 8-year-old who'd already lost one parent to forces beyond anyone's control, now grappling with the knowledge that her remaining parent had voluntarily put himself in mortal danger. "You want to know what I thought about when I was pulling that lady out of the car?" Emma nodded against his chest. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I thought about our goodbye that morning, about your rainbow backpack, about how you said 'love you' to the moon, and I said, and back again. I thought about how much I wanted to hear you say it again, about how I had to make it back to you. Did that make you scared, terrified? But it also made me careful. It made me pay attention to every second because I had to come back to you. You're the reason I survived, Emma, because I couldn't leave you alone." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. "Then Mommy didn't choose to leave us." "No, she didn't. Mommy's brain got sick and there was nothing anyone could do. That was something bad that happened that nobody could control. But you chose to go into that fire. You could have not done it. I could have, Daniel admitted. And if I had, I would have been safe. But I also would have known that I let someone die when I could have helped. And I don't think I could have looked at you the same way after that. Why not? Because you would have asked me someday why I didn't help, and I wouldn't have had a good answer, because the only honest answer would have been that I was too scared. And I don't want to teach you to let fear stop you from doing what's right." Emma pulled back slightly, looking at him with those old soul eyes that sometimes seemed to understand things she was too young to know. "Is that why you helped the lady? To teach me something, I helped her because she needed help, and I was there. But yes, part of me was thinking about you, about the kind of daddy I want to be for you, the kind of person I want you to become." A long silence stretched between them, Emma's fingers played with the collar of Daniel's t-shirt, her small face thoughtful. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby, I'm glad you saved her." Daniel's breath caught. "You are, even though it scared me, even though you got hurt." Emma's voice was firm despite the tears still tracking down her cheeks. "I'm glad you're the kind of daddy who helps people, because that means when I grow up, I can be the kind of person who helps people too, and I won't be scared to do it because you showed me how." Daniel pulled her closer, pressing his face into her hair, as his own tears finally fell. When had his daughters become so wise? When had she learned to see past her fear to the larger truth underneath? "Just maybe," Emma continued, her voice taking on a practical tone, "maybe next time you could help people in ways that don't make you catch on fire." Daniel laughed, surprised by the sudden shift from profound to pragmatic. "Deal, sweetheart. No more catching on fire. Promise, promise. Cross my heart." They sat together in the quiet of Emma's room, the family photo on the wall bearing witness to this moment of healing. Daniel thought about Laura, about how proud she would be of their daughter, how she would have handled this conversation with more grace, more wisdom. But he'd done his best, had been honest about his fears and his choices, had given Emma the truth, even when it was complicated. Emma yawned, exhaustion finally catching up with her adrenaline. "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" Of course. They made their way down the hallway together, Emma carrying her stuffed rabbit, and Daniel carrying the weight of being enough parent for both himself and Laura. In his room, Emma curled up on Laura's side of the bed, the side Daniel still couldn't bring himself to sleep on, even 2 years later. Daddy Emma's voice was sleepy now, fading toward dreams. "Yeah, I think Mommy sent you to save that lady." Daniel pulled the blanket up around her shoulders. "Why do you think that?" "Because Mommy knew what it was like to be scared. And she probably knew that lady was really scared in that car. So she sent you to help. Like how sometimes I think Mommy sends me good dreams when I'm sad. Maybe she did, sweetheart. Maybe she did." Emma's breathing evened out sleep, claiming her. Daniel lay beside her in the dark, thinking about choices and consequences, and the way 8-year-olds sometimes understood the universe better than adults. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Rachel Bennett. "Thank you again for everything. Hope you and Emma are doing well." He'd been having coffee with Rachel and her father, Robert, once a week. Now an informal arrangement that had started as Robert's need to express gratitude and evolved into something more like friendship. Rachel was working toward her master's in child psychology, passionate about helping kids who'd lost parents. She'd mentioned wanting to meet Emma someday to tell her how brave her father was. Daniel typed back, "We're good. Emma says hello. She's been wanting to meet you." The response was immediate. "I'd love that. Maybe next week?" He agreed and set the phone down. Tomorrow he'd make those arrangements. Tomorrow he'd continue building this strange new life that had emerged from 30 seconds of courage. But tonight he'd hold his daughter and be grateful that when she'd needed him to explain the unexplainable, he'd found the right words, or close enough to write that she could sleep peacefully beside him, her fear acknowledged, but not in control. "Love you to the moon," he whispered to the sleeping child beside him. In his heart, he heard Emma's response as clearly as if she'd spoken it aloud. And back again. "Daddy. Always and forever." 2 weeks after the accident, Daniel returned to work with his hands still bandaged and his movements slower than usual. The burns on his back had healed enough that he could wear his uniform shirt without too much discomfort, but gripping tools remained painful. Every twist of a wrench sent small shocks of pain through his reconstructed fingers. He was fixing a heating unit in the executive wing of Paramount Technologies, a job that normally would have taken him 20 minutes but was stretching toward an hour because his hands refused to cooperate with basic mechanical tasks when Tom Reynolds found him. Danny. Tom's voice carried a strange quality, almost nervous. Mr. Bennett wants to see you in his office. Now. Daniel's stomach dropped. Robert Bennett, the CEO of Paramount Technologies. In 5 years of working here, Daniel had never even been on the same floor as the man's office, let alone called to meet with him personally. Is this about the time I missed? Daniel was already mentally calculating how much money they had saved, how long it might last if he lost this job. Medical bills were piling up despite what insurance covered. Emma needed new shoes. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Just go up there, Danny. Tom's face was unreadable. Margaret's expecting you. The executive elevator felt like the longest ride of Daniel's life. His reflection in the polished metal doors showed a man who looked older than 35, worn down by grief and pain and choices that left scars visible and invisible. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his hands were still bandaged, and he was about to meet the CEO, looking like exactly what he was, a maintenance worker who'd bitten off more than he could chew. The top floor of Paramount Technologies was all marble and glass, with panoramic views of the Denver skyline and mountains beyond. Daniel had seen it in company newsletters, those carefully staged photos of executives shaking hands and cutting ribbons. Being here in person was overwhelming in a way he hadn't anticipated. Margaret Chen. Mr. Bennett's assistant smiled warmly at him. Mr. Morrison, he's expecting you. Please go right in. The office was larger than Daniel's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. Expensive artwork lined the walls, and the furniture probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. Robert Bennett stood by the window with his back turned, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a perfectly tailored suit. But it was the other person in the room who made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. Rachel Bennett sat in a wheelchair near her father's desk, her arm still in a cast, bandages visible on her forehead. But her eyes were alert and focused, and currently filled with tears as she looked at him. Mr. Morrison. Robert Bennett turned from the window, and Daniel could see that his eyes were red-rimmed with emotion. I'd like you to meet my daughter, Rachel. The world tilted sideways. His daughter. The woman Daniel had pulled from the burning car, the stranger he'd risked his life for, was Robert Bennett's daughter, the CEO's only child. Rachel struggled to stand from her wheelchair, wobbling slightly on unsteady legs. Before anyone could stop her, she crossed the room and threw her good arm around Daniel in a fierce hug. You saved my life. The words came out in a sob muffled against his shoulder. The doctor said I had less than 30 seconds before the fire reached the passenger compartment. They told me everything, your injuries, your burns, how you shielded me from the explosion. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed by the revelation and the weight of her gratitude. All he could think about was that morning weeks ago, about how close he'd come to driving past the accident, about Emma, about the choice between safety and courage. I just did what anyone would do, he said quietly. No. Robert Bennett's voice was thick with emotion as he approached them, and Daniel noticed the older man's hand was shaking slightly when he placed it on Daniel's shoulder. Mr. Morrison, Daniel, I've spent the last 2 weeks learning about you, about your wife Laura, about Emma, about how you've worked here for 5 years without a single complaint, how you've never missed a day except when you were literally in the hospital because you saved my daughter's life. The grip on Daniel's shoulder tightened. I've built this company on the principle that good people deserve recognition, but what you did goes beyond anything I could have imagined. Robert's voice broke slightly. Rachel is my only child. I lost my wife Margaret 10 years ago to cancer, and Rachel is all I have left in this world. Rachel pulled back from the hug, wiping tears from her cheeks. I've been having nightmares about being trapped in that car. The fire, the smoke, the feeling of not being able to move. But then I remember someone was there talking to me, telling me I'd be okay. Even though I was unconscious, somehow I heard you. You whispered thank you, Daniel said suddenly, right before the paramedics came. You said thank you. I remember that. Rachel's voice was soft. It was like hearing an angel. Robert cleared his throat, composing himself. Daniel, I want to make some things clear. First, all of your medical expenses have been covered. Every penny. That's non-negotiable. Mr. Bennett, I can't. Second, Robert held up a hand. We are promoting you to Facilities Director. It comes with a substantial salary increase and benefits that will cover Emma's healthcare and education through college. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Facilities Director. A position that would mean real financial security. A future where Emma wouldn't have to worry about money, where medical bills wouldn't keep him awake at night. Third. Robert's voice softened. Rachel has a request. Rachel smiled through her tears. I've been working on my master's degree in child psychology. Before the accident, I was driving to a children's shelter to deliver books and spend time with kids who've lost parents. It's something I do every week. She paused, glancing at her father. I'd like to meet Emma, not because I feel obligated to, but because I want to understand the kind of man who would risk leaving his daughter an orphan to save a stranger. I want to learn from both of you. Daniel felt tears he didn't know he'd been holding back start to fall. She'd like that. Emma would really like that. Robert Bennett gestured toward the sitting area of his office. Expensive leather chairs arranged around a coffee table that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. Please sit. Daniel lowered himself carefully into a chair, aware of how out of place he looked in his maintenance uniform amid all this polished luxury. Rachel maneuvered her wheelchair to face him, her expression open and earnest, in a way that reminded Daniel of Emma when she was trying to explain something important. I need you to understand something. Robert began settling into the chair across from Daniel. He looked smaller somehow, less like the powerful CEO and more like a father who'd come too close to losing everything that mattered. The morning of Rachel's accident, we'd had a fight. Rachel reached out and touched her father's hand. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Robert's voice was firm but gentle. He needs to understand what he gave back to me. The older man's eyes met Daniel's. I told my daughter she was wasting her education on charity work with children, that she should be focusing on the family business, learning to take over when I retire. She left angry with me. And then I got the call that she'd been in an accident. Robert's composure cracked slightly. For 10 minutes while I drove to the hospital, I thought I'd lost her. 10 minutes of imagining a world without my daughter in it. 10 minutes of regretting every harsh word, every moment I'd prioritized business over our relationship. 10 minutes of bargaining with whatever higher power might be listening, promising I'd be a better father if I just got another chance. You gave me that chance, Mr. Morrison. Robert's voice was raw with emotion. You gave me the opportunity to tell my daughter I was wrong, that I'm proud of her, that the work she does helping grieving children matters more than any profit margin or quarterly report. Daniel thought about his own last words to Emma that morning. Love you to the moon. Thank God he'd said it. Thank God that if the worst had happened, at least Emma would have known. I was so ready to give up, Rachel said quietly. Her voice pulled Daniel's attention back to her. After the accident, after I woke up in the hospital, all I could think about was how I'd wasted that morning fighting with my dad instead of telling him I loved him. How my last words to him might have been angry words. She wiped at her eyes. But then the doctors told me about you, about how you'd risked your life for a complete stranger, how you'd shielded me from the explosion with your own body, how you'd talked to me the whole time even though I couldn't respond. And I realized something. What's that Daniel asked? That I'd been given a second chance too, not just at life but at being the person I wanted to be. She looked at her father with obvious affection. My dad and we've spent 10 years circling around our grief over my mom, building walls instead of bridges, using work and charity and anything else we could find to avoid actually dealing with our loss. Your courage in saving me, it didn't just give us more time together, it gave us permission to finally heal. Robert nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. My wife Margaret died when Rachel was 15. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. I threw myself into building this company, telling myself I was securing Rachel's future. The truth is, I was running from my grief. And in the process, I lost 10 years with my daughter. He looked at Daniel directly. You taught me something about being a father. You showed me that being present means more than providing. That courage isn't just about grand gestures like running into burning cars. It's about showing up for the small moments, the lunch notes, the parent-teacher conferences, the everyday acts of love that build a life. Daniel thought about the note he'd written that morning. You're braver than you think. Simple words scrawled on a small piece of paper that Emma kept in a shoebox under her bed. Had he really understood what he was doing? Had he known those small gestures mattered this much? Your daughter, Robert continued. Tell me about her. Emma's 8. Daniel found himself smiling despite the weight of the conversation. She's smart and kind, and sometimes too wise for her own good. She collects rocks and believes in magic, and thinks every superhero looks exactly like me, even though I keep telling her I'm just a regular person. She lost her mother 2 years ago. Laura had a brain aneurysm. One minute she was laughing, playing with Emma in the backyard. The next minute she was gone. No warning, no chance to prepare. Rachel made a soft sound of sympathy. That must have been devastating. It was. Daniel's throat tightened with the memory. For a year I just went through the motions. Getting Emma to school, going to work, keeping us fed and housed. I cried in the shower so she wouldn't hear me. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. I burned more dinners than I can count. But you kept showing up, Robert said. Even when you were drowning in your own grief, you showed up for your daughter, because she needed me to. Daniel shrugged. You don't get to stop being a parent just because being a parent is hard. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, connected by loss and survival, and the strange ways life brings people together. I want to do something for you, Robert said finally. Beyond the medical expenses and the promotion. I want to establish a scholarship fund in your wife's name, for children who've lost parents, to help them afford the support and resources they need to heal. Daniel felt his breath catch. Laura would have loved that. Then help me build it. Robert leaned forward, his businessman focus returning, but tempered now with genuine warmth. You know what these families need. You've lived it. Be our voice for this. Help me turn my gratitude into something that honors your wife's memory and helps others. Before Daniel could respond, Rachel spoke up. And I want to include Emma in my work at the shelter. If she's interested. If you're comfortable with it. She paused. I think meeting other kids who've lost parents might help her. And honestly, I think she might help them too. Daniel thought about Emma feeding him applesauce in the hospital. About her wisdom when she'd said sometimes people who love us need help, and that's okay. About how she'd processed her fear and come out the other side stronger. She'd like that, he said. Emma would really like that. Robert stood and extended his hand. Daniel stood as well, his damaged fingers closing around the CEO's grip as firmly as they could manage. Welcome to the executive team, Daniel. And thank you. For my daughter. For reminding me what matters. For being the kind of man who stops when others drive past. After Daniel left the office after the elevator carried him back down to the maintenance floor, after he'd changed out of his uniform and prepared to drive home. Tom Reynolds found him in the parking lot. So Tom said, leaning against Daniel's truck. How'd it go? He offered me a promotion. Facilities director. That's great, Danny. He wants to start a scholarship fund in Laura's name. That's even better. And his daughter wants to meet Emma. Tom studied Daniel's face. You okay with all this? Daniel thought about the question. Was he okay? His hands still hurt. His back still ached. He had scars that would never fade. But he also had financial security for Emma's future. He had the chance to honor Laura's memory in a meaningful way. He had new friends who understood loss and courage. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. As he drove home, Daniel thought about how 30 seconds had changed everything. How one choice had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. How saving one life had somehow saved multiple lives, including his own. Emma was waiting on the apartment steps when he pulled up her rainbow backpack beside her and her face bright with anticipation. Beth must have told her about the meeting. Daddy! She launched herself at him as he got out of the truck. Did you meet the lady? The one you saved? I did, sweetheart, and she wants to meet you. Really? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? She works with kids who've lost parents. I thought maybe you'd like to help her sometimes. Emma considered this seriously. Like how you helped her. Sort of. But less on fire. Emma giggled, and the sound was like medicine for all the places Daniel still hurt. Can we help her this week? We'll see, baby. We'll see. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table and pulled out Laura's coffee mug from the cabinet where he'd kept it for 2 years. He'd never been able to bring himself to use it or put it away permanently. It had just sat there, a reminder of everything he'd lost. For the first time since Laura died, Daniel made himself a cup of coffee and drank from her mug. It didn't bring her back. Nothing ever would. But somehow it felt like she was there with him, proud of the choice he'd made and the new family they were building from the ashes of their grief. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Thank you for agreeing to let Emma help at the shelter. I think you're both going to change a lot of lives. Daniel typed back. You already changed ours. And it was true. 30 seconds of courage had connected them to people and purposes larger than he'd ever imagined, had turned a stranger into family, had created opportunities to heal while helping others heal. Laura had been right about so many things, but she'd been most right about this love means showing up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And Daniel intended to keep showing up for Emma, for the memory of Laura, for Rachel and Robert, for all the grieving children who needed to know they weren't alone. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one life touching another until the ripples spread farther than anyone could see. The promotion paperwork sat on Daniel's kitchen table like a promise and a challenge. Facilities director. A salary that would mean Emma could have the childhood she deserved, could attend good schools, could go to college without drowning in debt. Benefits that would cover her health care, her dental work, her future. It was everything Laura had wanted for their daughter, everything Daniel had been struggling to provide on a maintenance supervisor's salary. But accepting meant more than just a better paycheck. It meant joining the executive team. It meant meetings and budgets and responsibilities that extended far beyond fixing heating units and unclogging drains. It meant becoming someone he'd never imagined being. You're thinking too loud. Beth's voice came from the doorway. She'd stopped by to drop off Emma after school, and now she stood watching her brother stare at papers like they might bite him. It's a lot. It's an opportunity. Beth sat down across from him. Laura would want you to take it. Laura would want me to do what's best for Emma. Those are the same thing, Danny. Beth's voice was gentle but firm. Taking this job means financial security. It means Emma doesn't have to worry about money. It means you can breathe for the first time in 2 years. Daniel knew she was right. But accepting felt like admitting that his old life was really over, that the Daniel who'd been content fixing things with his hands was gone, replaced by someone who'd run into fires and met with CEOs and made decisions that changed lives. What if I'm not good at it? The question came out smaller than he'd intended. What if I'm just a maintenance guy pretending to be something more? Beth reached across the table and took his scarred hand in hers. You saved someone's life, Danny. You pulled a woman from a burning car while you were literally on fire. I think you can handle facilities management. That was different. That was instinct. So is this. Your instinct to take care of people, to fix things, to make everything work smoothly. That's what this job is, just on a bigger scale. Emma appeared in the doorway holding a paper she'd clearly been working on at the kitchen counter. She'd been unusually quiet since getting home, had gone straight to her homework, without her usual chatter about her day. Daddy, I made something for you. Daniel took the paper, and his throat tightened. It was a drawing of two figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. Above them, Emma had written in her careful printing, My daddy is brave in big ways and small ways. What's this for sweetheart? Mrs. Patterson asked us to draw pictures about our heroes. Emma climbed into the chair beside him. I drew you. I'm not a hero, baby. Yes, you are. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. Mrs. Patterson said heroes are people who help others even when it's hard. You help people every day. You fixed the heater at school so we wouldn't be cold. You helped that lady in the fire. You help me with my homework even when you're tired. She pointed to the drawing. See big ways and small ways, both kinds of brave. Daniel looked at his daughter at the drawing at the promotion paperwork. Maybe Beth was right. Maybe this was just another way of being brave, of showing up, of doing what needed to be done even when it felt overwhelming. You're right, he told Emma. Both kinds of brave. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel called Robert Bennett's direct line. The CEO answered on the second ring, his voice carrying hope and apprehension. Mr. Morrison, I was hoping you'd call. I'll take the job. Daniel's voice was steady, sure. But I have conditions. Name them. I don't want to stop doing the work. The hands-on maintenance. I need to stay connected to the building, to the people who keep it running. I'm not interested in being the kind of director who never leaves their office. Agreed. What else? The scholarship fund. I want to be involved in selecting recipients. Want to make sure it's going to families who really need it, not just the ones who look good on paper. Absolutely. Anything else? Daniel took a breath. I need flexibility for Emma. She's 8 and she's lost her mother. Sometimes she needs me to show up for things. School events, doctor appointments, days when she just needs her dad. I won't be the kind of father who puts work first. There was a pause on the line. Then Robert's voice came through, thick with emotion. That's exactly the kind of father I should have been. Consider it done. They discussed plans, start dates, transition procedures. When Daniel finally hung up, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just for survival, but for the future. For building something meaningful from the ashes of loss. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Dad told me you accepted. Emma and I are having lunch tomorrow. Want to join? Daniel smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. The next day, Daniel found himself in a cafe downtown, watching his daughter and Rachel Bennett bond over chocolate chip cookies and stories about rocks. Emma had brought her entire collection in her backpack, and Rachel listened with genuine interest as Emma explained the significance of each stone. This one's from the park where Mommy used to take me. Emma held up a smooth, grey river rock. She said it was special because the water made it that way over a really long time. That's beautiful, Rachel said. Your mom sounds like she was really special. She was. Emma's voice was wistful but not sad. She taught me that patient things are the strongest things. like how water can shape a rock just by being patient. Rachel met Daniel's eyes over Emma's head, and something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. The knowledge that grief had shaped both of them, patient and persistent, into something stronger than they'd been before. "I have rocks too," Rachel said, "from places my mom took me." She pointed to a small pendant around her neck. "This one's from our last trip together, before she got sick." Can I see? Rachel unclasped the necklace and handed it to Emma, who examined it with the seriousness of a jeweler appraising a diamond. "It's beautiful." Emma looked up at Rachel with those old soul eyes. "I bet your mom is proud of you, for helping kids and being brave and wearing her rock." "I hope so," Rachel said softly. "She is." Emma said it with complete certainty. "Because mums don't stop loving us just because they go to heaven. They just love us from farther away." Daniel felt his eyes burning with tears. Where did his 8-year-old learn such wisdom? How did she know exactly what to say to help someone else heal? After lunch, as they walked Emma back to school, Rachel pulled Daniel aside. "She's remarkable, you know. She's everything good about Laura. None of the broken parts of me. I think she's got plenty of the good parts of you, too." Rachel's voice was gentle. The courage, the compassion, the ability to see what people need and give it to them. "She learns by example." "Exactly." Rachel smiled, "which is why I think she'd be perfect for what I wanted to propose. What's that? I want to officially invite Emma to volunteer at the children's shelter. Once a week, maybe. She's got this gift for connecting with kids, for understanding grief in a way that most adults never achieve. She's 8, and she's already lived through loss that would break some adults. That's not a bad thing, Daniel. It's given her empathy, wisdom, the ability to help others who are walking the same path." Daniel watched Emma skip ahead of them, her backpack bouncing with each step. The same rainbow backpack from that morning that felt like a lifetime ago. "Okay," he said. "But I come too, at least at first. I wouldn't have it any other way." As they reached the school, Emma turned and waved. Rachel waved back, and Daniel saw something in that exchange. The beginning of a friendship. The start of healing. The ripple effects of courage spreading outward in ways he was only beginning to understand. That night, Daniel signed the promotion paperwork. He also signed the preliminary documents for the Laura Morrison Memorial Scholarship Fund, and he added Emma's name to the volunteer roster at Bright Hope Children's Center. 3 signatures that would change their lives. 3 choices built on the foundation of one choice made in 30 seconds. Beth had been right. Laura would have wanted this, would have wanted him to build something beautiful from their tragedy, would have wanted Emma to use her grief to help others. Daniel looked at Laura's photo on the mantel, at her frozen smile and laughing eyes. "We're doing okay," he whispered to her. "Emma and me, we're going to help a lot of people. Make a difference. Honor your memory in a way that matters." The photo didn't answer, but Daniel could feel Laura's presence as clearly as if she were standing beside him. Approval, pride, permission to keep living, keep growing, keep choosing courage. Tomorrow he'd start his new job. Tomorrow Emma would take her first steps toward helping other children understand that grief was survivable. Tomorrow they'd continue building the life that Laura's death had shattered and Daniel's courage had started to rebuild. But tonight he'd allow himself to hope, to believe that sometimes the worst moments lead to unexpected blessings, that sometimes saving someone else is exactly how you save yourself, and that sometimes 30 seconds of courage can create ripples that spread farther than anyone imagined possible. Emma spent 2 hours arranging her stuffed animals on the couch in what she called a welcoming committee. Her 3 bears sat in a precise row, flanked by a threadbare rabbit and a dinosaur missing one eye. She'd picked wildflowers from the apartment complex's small garden, the kind of scraggly blooms that grew despite neglect, and arranged them in a jelly jar on the table with the careful attention of a florist preparing for a royal wedding. She'd changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on the blue one, with yellow flowers that she said matched the wildflowers, which meant everything matched, and matching was important when you were meeting someone special. Daniel watched his daughter's preparations with a mixture of amusement and tenderness. Rachel Bennett was coming to dinner, their first real time together outside of hospitals and cafes, and Emma had decided this required the full treatment. "Daddy, what if she doesn't like me?" Emma's voice was small, uncertain in a way that broke Daniel's heart. He knelt beside her, breathing in the scent of the strawberry shampoo she'd insisted on using twice to make sure her hair was extra clean. "Baby, she's going to love you. But what if she thinks I'm weird for saving rocks? Then she'd be wrong. And I don't think Rachel's the kind of person who thinks rocks are weird." The doorbell rang, and Emma froze. Then she was behind Daniel's legs, her small body pressed against him like she could disappear into his shadow. Daniel opened the door to find Rachel standing there, balancing on a cane, her left arm still in a cast. She held a paper bag in her good hand, and her smile was nervous in a way that made Daniel realize she was just as anxious about this dinner as Emma was. "Hi," Rachel said. "I brought supplies." She lifted the bag slightly. "I heard someone here likes to color." From behind Daniel's jeans, a small voice asked, "What kind of supplies?" Rachel's smile widened. "The good kind." She lowered herself carefully to sit on the floor right there in the doorway, not even waiting to be invited in. Daniel stepped aside, watching as Rachel pulled items from her bag. Markers in every color imaginable, construction paper, glitter glue that Emma had been begging for, and a book about female scientists with a bright cover and illustrations that practically glowed. "Is that about Marie Curie?" Emma peeked out from behind Daniel's legs. "It is." "You know her?" "Daddy read me about her. She discovered radiation and won the Nobel Prize twice, and she was really brave even when people said girls couldn't be scientists." Rachel's eyes met Daniel's over Emma's head, and something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. The acknowledgement that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone new into your carefully protected world. "Well," Rachel said, opening the book, "I think brave girls who believe in science deserve to hear more stories about brave women who changed the world." Emma stepped out from behind Daniel's legs, her curiosity overwhelming her shyness. "Can I show you my rock collection first?" "Absolutely." Daniel watched his daughter take this stranger's hand. This woman he'd pulled from fire and smoke and certain death, and led her into the small living room where Laura's pictures still hung on every wall. Watched Rachel pause at each photo, studying them with respectful attention rather than uncomfortable avoidance. "She was beautiful," Rachel said softly, looking at a picture of Laura laughing at the beach, her hair wild in the wind, her smile unguarded and genuine. She was, Daniel confirmed. "She would have liked you." "How do you know?" "Because you're sitting on our floor after driving across town with a broken arm just to color with an 8-year-old. That's exactly the kind of person she would have loved. The apartment was small, the furniture was second-hand, and the carpet was stained from 100 Emma-related accidents over the years. Markers scattered across the coffee table. Glitter glue made its way onto surfaces it probably shouldn't have, and laughter-filled rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Emma showed Rachel each rock in her collection, explaining their origins with the seriousness of a museum curator. "This one's from when we went camping before Mommy got sick. This one's from her favorite park. This one's just from the parking lot, but it's shaped like a heart, so it's special." Rachel listened to each story, asked questions, treated Emma's collection like it was the most important thing in the world. And maybe Daniel thought, watching them together, maybe it was. Because these rocks were Emma's way of holding on to memories. of keeping her mother close. You know what Rachel said, pulling something from her pocket? I have a special rock, too. She showed Emma a small green stone, polished smooth. My mum gave this to me when I was about your age. She said it was for courage, that when things got scary I could hold it and remember I was brave. Does it work? Emma asked. Rachel's eyes found Daniel's. Yeah, it really does. They colored until Emma's hands were stained with marker and dinner was getting cold on the stove. Daniel had made spaghetti one of the 3 meals he could cook without burning, and even managed not to overcook the pasta for once. As they ate, Emma chatted about school and friends, and the volcano project she was planning for the science fair. Rachel listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma light up with excitement. And when Emma suddenly asked unprompted, and with the brutal honesty of children, "Do you miss your mom?" Rachel didn't flinch. Every day, she said simply. But I'm learning that missing someone doesn't mean you can't still be happy. It just means they were really important to you. Emma nodded seriously. Daddy says Mommy would want us to be happy, even though she's not here. She's absolutely right. Rachel's voice was gentle. And I bet your mom is watching you right now, proud of how kind and smart and brave you are. After dinner, Emma fell asleep with her head in Rachel's lap, exhausted from excitement and the emotional work of letting someone new into her world. Daniel carefully lifted her and carried her to bed, tucking her in with her favorite stuffed rabbit. When he returned to the living room, Rachel was standing at the door preparing to leave. She touched the doorframe gently, her fingers tracing the height marks Daniel had penciled there over the years, documenting Emma's growth. Age 5, age 6, age 7, each one labeled. Laura's handwriting up to age 6, then Daniel's careful printing taking over. You kept them, Rachel said. Of course. Some people would have painted over them, started fresh. Daniel thought about the coffee mug. He still couldn't put away the perfume bottle on Laura's dresser, the wedding photo he'd finally been able to move from his bedroom to the living room. I'm not trying to forget her. I'm trying to figure out how to keep living while honoring her memory. I think tonight was a good step, Rachel said softly. After she left, Daniel found Emma's latest artwork on the coffee table. She'd drawn 3 figures, a tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a third one carefully colored labeled Rachel, our friend who Daddy saved and who came back. At the bottom, in Emma's careful printing, "We are growing our family." Daniel traced the words with his still healing fingers and felt Laura's presence as clearly as if she were standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her voice in his ear, saying what she'd always said. Love grows. It doesn't replace. It just keeps expanding to hold more and more light. Not replacing, he whispered to her photo on the wall. Just growing. The picture of Laura seemed to smile her frozen moment of joy, giving him permission to keep finding his own. 3 weeks after the accident, Rachel sat in her childhood bedroom at her father's estate, staring at the wheelchair in the corner. Temporary, the doctors had said. A few more weeks, and she'd be walking normally again. But right now, that chair represented everything she hated. Helplessness, dependence, vulnerability. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from her father's assistant. The physical therapist is here. Rachel ignored it. She'd cancelled 3 sessions this week already. What was one more? There was a knock on her door. Not her father's authoritative tap, not the staff's professional knock. Something gentler. Rachel. Can I come in? Daniel's voice. He'd started visiting twice a week, an arrangement that had begun as awkward gratitude and evolved into something more comfortable. He never mentioned the accident unless Rachel brought it up first. Never treated her like she was fragile. Just showed up with stories about Emma and questions about her research and a presence that somehow made the days feel less heavy. It's open. Daniel entered, moving carefully, his hand still wrapped in light bandages. Rachel noticed he was getting better at gripping things, his fingers working more smoothly than they had even last week. "Your dad said you cancelled PT again." "I'm tired." Rachel's voice was flat, lifeless, in a way she barely recognized as her own. Daniel studied her for a moment, then did something unexpected. He sat down on the floor beside her bed, his back against the wall, and started unwrapping the bandage from one of his hands. "Want to see something ugly?" Rachel hesitated, then looked. His palm was a map of scars, pink and white, and still healing. The skin looked tight, uncomfortable. 3 of his fingers bent at slightly wrong angles, like they'd been broken and reset, but hadn't quite remembered their original positions. "The therapist says I'll never play piano again," Daniel said conversationally. "Not that I could before, but you know, the option's gone now. Can't grip a wrench the same way either. Took me 20 minutes to button my shirt this morning. Had to get Emma to help me with my shoelaces yesterday, because my fingers just stopped working halfway through. Why are you showing me this? Because you're sitting in here feeling sorry for yourself, and I need you to know that's okay." His voice was gentle but firm, carrying an authority earned through experience rather than position. "You almost died, Rachel. You're allowed to be scared and angry and tired. You're allowed to hide in your room and cancel PT and feel like the world is unfair." "I'm not scared." The words came out sharp, defensive. "I'm furious." Rachel's voice cracked. "I'm furious that I don't remember most of it. Furious that you have these scars because of me. Furious that every time I close my eyes I smell smoke and gasoline, and I can't even remember if I thanked you properly. Furious that I'm sitting here in this chair when I should be at the shelter helping kids who actually need me. You did thank me. Right before the paramedics came. I was unconscious. You still did it." Daniel smiled slightly. "And these scars, I'd do it again. Every single time. Without hesitation." That's the problem. Rachel finally looked at him directly, tears building behind her eyes. "You would do it again, and Emma would lose her father, and I couldn't live with that. Don't you understand? Every time I think about what you risked for me, someone you didn't even know, I feel like I'm drowning in debt. I can never repay." Daniel was quiet for a moment, and Rachel could see him choosing his words carefully. "My wife Laura used to volunteer at a children's hospital. Every week she'd spend hours reading to kids who were sick, kids who might not make it. And I used to worry myself sick every time she went, thinking about all the germs, all the sadness she was exposing herself to, all the ways she could get hurt." "What did she say?" "She said hiding from pain doesn't protect you from it. It just makes you smaller." Daniel met Rachel's eyes. "You almost died, and that's terrifying. But you didn't die. You're here. And yeah, recovery is hard and scary and unfair. But hiding in this room isn't protecting you. It's just making your world smaller." Rachel felt tears spill over, hot and angry and sad all at once. "I was driving to the children's shelter when it happened." Her voice broke. "I had a trunk full of art supplies and books. I was going to read to a little girl named Sophia who just lost her mom to cancer. She's been waiting 3 weeks for me to come back, and I can't face her. I can't face any of them. Why not? Because what if they see me like this, weak and scared and broken? How can I tell them to be brave when I'm hiding in my bedroom like a child?" Daniel reached out, and after a moment, Rachel took his scarred hand in her good one. His palm was rough with healing tissue, warm with life. "Then you show them that broken people can still be brave, that scared people can still show up. That's the most important lesson you could teach them, Rachel. Not that you're perfect or fearless, but that you're human and you keep trying anyway." Rachel looked at their joined hands, at the visible proof of his courage, at the scars he'd earned saving her life. "Will you come with me when I'm ready to go back?" Daniel's expression softened. "Emma and I would love that." 3 days later, Rachel went to PT. It hurt. Her body protested every movement, every stretch, every exercise designed to rebuild strength she'd lost while lying in a hospital bed. But Daniel had been right about something making the world smaller didn't protect you. It just meant you had less space to heal. 2 weeks after that, Rachel stood outside Bright Hope Children's Center with Daniel and Emma beside her. She'd graduated from wheelchair to cane, though her left arm was still in a cast, and probably would be for another month. The building looked exactly the same as it had before the accident, bright murals painted on brick walls, the sound of children playing in the yard. But Rachel felt completely different. "You okay?" Daniel's voice was quiet, just for her. "No. But I'm here anyway." Emma took Rachel's free hand, her small fingers wrapping around Rachel's with surprising strength. "That's brave," she said matter-of-factly. "Doing stuff even when you're scared." Patricia Washington, the shelter's director, met them at the door. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw Rachel. "Welcome back, honey. We've missed you." Inside the reading circle gathered 10 children ages 5 through 12, some shy, some eager, all of them carrying the weight of loss in their eyes. Rachel recognized a few faces kids she'd been reading to for months before the accident. Others were new, fresh grief written in the way they held themselves. "This is my friend Daniel." Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He's very brave. And this is his daughter Emma, who understands what you're all feeling." Emma waved shyly, then sat down among the children with no fear, no judgment, no sense that she was different from them in any meaningful way. A girl about Emma's age leaned over. "I'm Lily. Did your mum die too?" Emma nodded. 2 years ago. Her brain got sick. My dad died in a car crash." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "That's really hard," Emma said, taking Lily's hand with the casual intimacy of children who recognized kindred spirits. "But my daddy says we can be sad and still have happy days. It doesn't mean we're forgetting them. It just means we're learning to carry the missing." Lily leaned against Emma's shoulder, and Rachel had to look away, her throat tight with emotion. This was why she did this work. This moment right here, when children who felt alone discovered they weren't, when shared pain became shared healing. Rachel opened the book she'd brought, a story about strong women who'd changed the world, and began to read. Her voice wavered at first, but grew stronger with each page. The children hung on every word, some sitting on the floor, some in volunteers' laps. Emma in the middle with her arm around Lily. Daniel stood in the back, helping kids who struggled with the craft project that followed. His scarred hands worked slowly but surely, showing them how to glue construction paper, how to draw self-portraits, how to write words when the letters got jumbled. A boy named Marcus, maybe 9 years old, asked, "Did you get hurt?" "Being a hero. I got hurt helping someone who needed help," Daniel said carefully. "And yeah, it hurts sometimes. But it reminds me why scars are important. Why? Because they're proof we survived something hard. They're proof we're still here." Marcus looked at his own hands, small and unmarked. "I have scars too. You just can't see them." "I know, buddy." Daniel's voice was gentle. "We all do." As they were leaving, Lily caught up to Emma in the parking lot. "Do you think your mommy's proud of you?" Emma looked at her seriously, this girl who'd become a friend in the space of an afternoon. "I think she's proud I'm trying, even when I'm sad, even when you're sad, especially then." Emma said it with complete certainty, because being sad means we loved them, and love never stops, even when people go to heaven. Lily hugged Emma tight, both of them crying, but the healing kind of crying, the kind that washed away some of the hurt, instead of adding to it. In the car, Emma was quiet for a long time. Then, "Daddy," Yeah, sweetheart, I think helping people makes the sad smaller. How so? Because when you see other people are sad too, you know you're not alone. And when you help them feel better, it helps you feel better too. That's what love does, right? Makes more love. Daniel glanced at Rachel in the passenger seat. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling too. Yeah, baby, he said, his own voice thick. That's exactly what love does. That night, Emma drew a picture of the reading circle. All the kids holding hands with a rainbow over them. The caption read, "We help each other heal." Daniel taped it to the wall next to Laura's photo, next to the height marks, next to all the other evidence that their small family was growing in ways he'd never anticipated. Rachel texted him later. "Thank you for today, for making me go, for reminding me why this matters." He typed back, "Thank you for teaching Emma that broken doesn't mean beyond repair." Because that was the truth. They were all learning, wasn't it? That courage looked like showing up even when you were terrified. That healing happened in community, not isolation. That sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. And that love, real love, didn't make you smaller or demand perfection. It just kept expanding, creating space for more light, more hope, more connection than you ever thought possible. 2 months after the accident, Robert Bennett invited Daniel to his office. Not for business he'd specified over the phone. For coffee. Man to man. Daniel arrived to find not the imposing CEO in the tailored suit, but a father in shirt sleeves with photos spread across his desk. Robert looked older without the armor of executive presentation, more vulnerable, more human. "My wife, Margaret Roberts," said, gesturing to the pictures. One showed a beautiful woman with Rachel's eyes laughing at the camera. Another showed her with teenage Rachel, both of them at the beach arms around each other. She died when Rachel was 15. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to... He couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel understood. Some endings were too hard to say out loud. "I'm sorry." Robert looked up and Daniel could see the weight of a decade of grief in his eyes. "I threw myself into work. Told myself I was doing it for Rachel to secure her future, to make sure she'd never want for anything." His laugh was bitter, self-aware. What I was really doing was running from grief. And Rachel grew up with a father who was physically present, but emotionally absent. He opened a drawer and pulled out a flask, poured coffee from a French press that sat on a side table, then seemed to think better of it, and added a splash of whiskey to his own cup. Daniel shook his head when offered the bottle. "The morning of Rachel's accident, we'd had a fight." Robert's voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the pain underneath. "I told her she was wasting her education on charity work with children, that she should be focusing on the family business, learning to take over when I retire, that helping grieving kids wasn't a career, it was a hobby." Robert met Daniel's eyes directly. She left angry. And then I got the call that she'd been in an accident. For 10 minutes while I drove to the hospital, I thought I'd lost her. 10 minutes of imagining a world without my daughter in it. 10 minutes of regretting every harsh word, every missed dinner, every time I'd prioritized a meeting over her life. Daniel thought about his own last words to Emma that morning before the accident. "Love you to the moon." Thank God they'd been words of love. Thank God that if the worst had happened, Emma would have known. 10 minutes of bargaining with whatever higher power might be listening. Robert continued, promising I'd be a better father if I just got another chance. Promising I'd tell her I was proud that I was wrong, that her work mattered more than any quarterly earnings report. He took a long drink of his coffee. "You gave me that chance, Daniel. You gave me the opportunity to keep those promises. I just did what needed doing." "No." Robert's voice was firm. "You did what most people wouldn't have. You risked leaving your daughter an orphan to save a stranger. That's not just doing what needs doing. That's courage. That's the kind of sacrifice most people can't even imagine making. Daniel thought about Emma feeding him applesauce in the hospital, about her wise, beyond her years observation that both kinds of brave mattered. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe it had been extraordinary, but it had also been necessary. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel asked. "Because I want you to understand what you gave back to me." Robert stood and walked to the window looking out over the Denver skyline. "I've spent 10 years building this company, making money, acquiring assets, beating competitors. I told myself it was for Rachel, that I was creating a legacy for her." He turned back to Daniel. "But what I was really doing was avoiding the hard work of actually being her father, of being present, of listening to her dreams instead of imposing my own, of letting her be who she wanted to be instead of who I needed her to be. And now I'm trying to be the father she deserves, the father I should have been all along." Robert returned to his desk, pulled out a leather-bound folder. "This is the framework for the Laura Morrison Memorial Scholarship. I want you to look it over. Make sure it's what your wife would have wanted." Daniel took the folder with hands that were steadier now, healing more each day. Inside was a detailed plan. Scholarships for children who'd lost parents, grief counseling, support groups, mentorship programs. It was comprehensive and thoughtful, and exactly the kind of thing Laura would have loved. "She would have loved this," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then help me make it happen." Robert leaned forward, his executive focus returning, but tempered now with genuine warmth. "You know what these families need. You've lived it. Be our voice for this. Help me turn my gratitude and my regret into something that honors your wife's memory and helps others." Daniel thought about Emma at the shelter taking Lily's hand. About Rachel reading to children who'd lost parents, using her own near-death experience to help others heal. About the way courage and kindness created ripples that spread farther than anyone could see. "I'll do it, but on one condition. Name it. We do this right." Daniel's voice was firm. Not as some corporate PR initiative. Not as a way to make you feel better about being a distant father. We do it because these kids need real help, and we're in a position to provide it. Robert smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look 10 years younger. "I wouldn't want it any other way." They spent the next hour going over details. Daniel shared stories about the first year after Laura died, about the support groups that had helped and the ones that hadn't, about what Emma had needed and what well-meaning people had gotten wrong. Robert listened, actually listened, taking notes and asking questions that showed he was thinking about implementation, not just concept. As Daniel prepared to leave, Robert stopped him at the door. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I've been successful by any conventional measure. Made millions, built a company, earned respect in my industry. But watching you with Emma, seeing how you've raised her despite your grief, seeing the kind of father you've managed to be even when your world fell apart." Robert's voice caught. "You're more successful than I'll ever be. You've raised a daughter who's kind and brave and knows she's loved. That's worth more than any empire I could build." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. "Teach me," Robert said. "Not the business stuff. You'll learn that easily enough. Teach me how to be present, how to show up, how to be the kind of father Rachel deserves. I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach anyone anything. You saved my daughter's life. I think you're qualified to teach me how to actually be her father." As Daniel left the office, he thought about Robert's words, about success and failure, and how sometimes the things we think matter most are just distractions from the things that actually do. He texted Emma from the elevator. "Love you, sweetheart. Can't wait to see you after school." Her response came immediately. "Love you to the moon, Daddy. And back again." Simple words. a simple exchange. But it contained everything that mattered: love given and received, presents promised, and kept connection maintained despite the demands of the day. Robert Bennett could learn from that. Hell, Daniel was still learning from it himself. The work of being present, of showing up, of choosing connection over convenience, it never really ended. But it was the most important work any of them would ever do. And if Daniel could help Robert learn that lesson, could help repair the relationship between father and daughter that grief had damaged, well, that was just another ripple spreading outward from 30 seconds of courage on a rain-slicked highway. Another way that saving one life had somehow started saving many. 3 months after the accident, Daniel found himself driving toward Bright Hope Children's Center, with Emma bouncing excitedly in the back seat and Rachel fidgeting nervously in the passenger seat. This wasn't their first visit. Rachel had returned several times since that initial emotional homecoming, but it was the first time Emma would be officially volunteering rather than just accompanying her father. Rachel, what are the kids like? Emma leaned forward against her seatbelt, her face bright with anticipation. They're brave, Rachel said, turning in her seat to look at Emma. Like you, they're dealing with really hard things, but they keep showing up. Keep trying. Keep hoping. Even though they're sad. Especially because they're sad. Being sad takes courage, too. Emma absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. I was really sad when Mommy died. Did that make me brave? The bravest, Rachel said firmly. And that's why I think you're going to be amazing at this. The center sat on a quiet street in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was slowly recovering. The building itself was old brick, probably a school once, with bright murals painted by volunteers covering the worn exterior. Children's laughter drifted from the playground in back, a sound that seemed almost miraculous given the grief these kids carried. Patricia Washington met them at the door, her warm smile welcoming and genuine. Rachel. And you must be the famous Emma. Patricia knelt down to Emma's level. Your dad told me you're going to help us today. If that's okay. Emma's confidence wavered slightly in the face of this new situation. It's more than okay. It's wonderful. Patricia stood and led them inside. We have about 15 kids here today, ages 5 to 13. All of them have lost at least one parent. Some have lost both and are being raised by grandparents or other family. They're good kids, but they're hurting. Be patient with them. Be honest. And most importantly, be yourself. The main room had been transformed since Daniel's last visit. New bookshelves lined one wall, donated by Paramount Technologies. Comfortable seating areas invited quiet reading. An art corner overflowed with supplies. Everything designed to create a space where grieving children could just be children for a few hours. The kids were gathered in a circle on colorful floor cushions. Some looked curious about the newcomers. Others seemed withdrawn, lost in their own internal worlds. Daniel recognized Lily immediately, the girl who'd befriended Emma on that first visit. Her face lit up when she saw them. Emma, you came back. I promised I would, Emma said simply, moving to sit beside Lily without hesitation. She pulled her backpack off and started unpacking items she'd brought: her rock collection, a photo album, some of her favorite books. Daniel watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. She had no training in grief counseling, no expertise in child psychology. She was just an 8-year-old who'd survived something terrible and was willing to share that survival with others. Rachel settled into the reading chair at the front of the circle. Today I brought a story about brave people who faced really hard things. But before we start, does anyone want to share something? Something good that happened this week, or something hard you're dealing with, or just anything you want to talk about? A small boy, maybe 6 years old, raised his hand. I had a good dream about my mama. She was smiling at me. That's beautiful, Marcus. Rachel's voice was gentle. Those dreams are gifts, aren't they? Another child. A girl about 10 spoke up. I got mad at my teacher because she said to make Mother's Day cards, and I don't have a mother anymore, and it made me really angry. That makes sense, Rachel said. Did you tell your teacher how you felt? No, I just went to the bathroom and cried. Emma raised her hand. Rachel nodded at her. At my school, I told my teacher about my mom dying. And now when they do stuff for Mother's Day, she lets me make cards for my dad instead. Or for my mom in heaven. Maybe you could tell your teacher that you need something different. The girl looked at Emma with something like hope in her eyes. You think that would work? It worked for me, Emma said. Teachers want to help. Sometimes they just don't know how. Daniel felt his chest tighten. When had his daughter learned to articulate these things? When had she developed this wisdom about navigating grief in a world that wasn't always equipped to handle it? Rachel read her story, her voice strong and clear. The children listened raptly, occasionally asking questions or making observations. After the story, they broke into smaller groups for activities. Emma gravitated to the art corner with Lily and 2 other girls. Daniel found himself helping a 13-year-old boy named Jordan with a woodworking project. The kid was building a small box, struggling with the corners. Here, let me show you. Daniel demonstrated his scarred hands, moving slowly but surely. You want to measure twice, cut once. And don't worry if it's not perfect. Perfect is boring anyway. How'd you get those scars? Jordan asked, the blunt curiosity of teenagers who hadn't yet learned to dance around difficult questions. Pulled someone out of a burning car, got hurt in the process. Jordan studied him. Was it worth it? Daniel thought about Rachel, about Emma volunteering at this shelter, about the scholarship fund, and all the ripples spreading outward from that one choice. Yeah, it was worth it. Even though you got hurt, especially because I got hurt. Daniel met the boy's eyes. Because now my daughter knows that helping people matters more than staying safe. And that's a lesson worth some scars. Jordan was quiet for a moment, then went back to work on his box with renewed focus. Across the room, Emma and Lily were deep in conversation, their heads bent together over a shared piece of paper. Daniel couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Emma's hand taking Lily's, could see the way both girls leaned into each other, finding comfort in shared experience. Later, Patricia pulled Daniel aside. That daughter of yours is something special. She gets it from her mother. She gets it from both of you, Patricia corrected gently. Do you know what she did today? What? There's a boy here, Tommy, who hasn't spoken since his father died 3 months ago. Completely nonverbal. His therapist thinks it's selective mutism triggered by trauma. Emma sat down next to him during art time and just started talking. About rocks. About her mother. About being sad. And you know what Tommy did? Daniel shook his head. He picked up a crayon and started drawing. First time he's engaged with any activity in weeks. Patricia's eyes were bright with tears. Your daughter has a gift, Daniel. She doesn't try to fix anyone. She just sits with them in their pain. That's rare, even in trained therapists. As they prepared to leave, Lily caught up to Emma in the parking lot. Will you come back? Every week, Emma promised. If my dad says it's okay. It's okay, Daniel said immediately. Lily hugged Emma fiercely. Thank you for being my friend, for understanding. That's what friends do, Emma said simply. In the car, Emma was quiet for a long time. Rachel had ridden with Patricia to discuss expanding the program, so it was just father and daughter in the comfortable silence they'd perfected over 2 years of navigating grief together. Daddy Emma's voice was small. Yeah, sweetheart. Is it okay that I feel happy here? Even though all those kids are so sad. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Why wouldn't it be okay? Because, Emma struggled with the words, because I'm happy I can help them and Mommy can't help anymore because she's in heaven. Does that mean I'm replacing her? Oh, baby. Daniel pulled into a parking lot so he could turn around and look at her properly. You're not replacing Mommy. You're honoring her. By being the kind of person she raised you to be. By helping others the way she always helped others. You think she'd be proud? I know she would be. Emma nodded, satisfied. Then I want to keep doing it. Coming here. Helping. Making the sad smaller for other kids like me. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. Me too. Sweetheart, me too. That night, Emma drew another picture. This one showed the reading circle at the shelter, all the children holding hands with the sun shining above them. The caption read, "Sometimes the best way to heal is to help someone else heal." Daniel taped it to the growing gallery on their wall, next to Laura's photo, next to all the other evidence that pain didn't have to be the end of the story. That sometimes the worst things led to the best things. That courage and compassion created light even in the darkest places. Rachel texted him later. Patricia said Emma was amazing today. Thank you for sharing her with us. Thank you for giving her a place to share her gifts. Daniel typed back. Because that was the truth of it, wasn't it? Emma had always been kind, had always been wise beyond her years, but the shelter gave her a place to use those gifts, to transform her own pain into something that helped others. And in helping others, she was healing herself. They all were. One child at a time, one story shared, one hand held, one moment of understanding that reminded everyone involved that they weren't alone in their grief. Laura would have loved this, Daniel thought, looking at his daughter's drawing. She would have been so proud of Emma, so proud of all of them. And maybe wherever she was watching, seeing the ripples spread, seeing love multiply, seeing her daughter grow into someone who understood that the best response to pain was compassion. That was Laura's legacy, not in buildings or bank accounts, but in the kind hearts of the people she'd loved and the children those people helped heal. Thursday dinners had become tradition. Rachel arrived at 6 o'clock every week, always bringing yellow flowers that reminded her of her mother's garden, and Emma would bounce to the door with barely contained excitement. They'd been doing this for 3 months now, and the routine had settled into something comfortable, something that felt less like obligation and more like family. Tonight, Daniel and Rachel worked side by side in the small kitchen while Emma set the table with careful precision. She knew which plate Rachel preferred, the blue one with painted flowers. She knew Rachel liked her water with lemon. These small acts of attention that children notice and remember. You've gotten better at cooking, Rachel observed. Watching Daniel stir sauce with hands that worked better each week. The scars were still visible, probably always would be, but function had returned enough that he could grip and chop and measure without frustration. Had to. Emma was getting tired of pizza and cereal. Rachel laughed. Laura was the cook. Laura was everything. Daniel's smile was wistful but not painful. She could make anything. Complicated recipes from memory, perfect every time. He paused, remembering. I miss her laugh most, I think. She had this ridiculous snort when something really got her, and it would make everyone else laugh too. My mom had a laugh like that, Rachel said softly. She reached past Daniel for the salt, their shoulders brushing in the small space. Margaret could light up a whole room. Even when she was sick, even during chemo, she'd find things to laugh about. What do you miss most? Her wisdom. Rachel's voice caught slightly. She always knew the right thing to say. When I was struggling with school or friends or just life, she'd have this way of cutting through all my anxiety and getting to the truth. I'd give anything to talk to her now, To tell her about the accident, about my work at the shelter, about all of this. She'd be proud of you, Daniel said. How do you know? Because you're using your second chance to help others. That's what parents dream their kids will do. Not just survive, but thrive in a way that makes the world better. They carried food to the table where Emma was arranging napkins in elaborate fans she'd seen in a YouTube video. Everything had to be perfect, had to be special, because this was their family dinner. And family dinners mattered. Over pasta and salad and bread that was only slightly burned, Emma chatted about school, about the science project she was planning, about her friend who was moving away, about the book she was reading that had a character who reminded her of Rachel. After Emma was tucked in bed, her latest drawing taped to the wall and her stuffed rabbit secure in her arms, Daniel and Rachel sat on the couch with coffee in their hands. This was Daniel's favorite part of Thursday, these quiet conversations after Emma slept when they could talk about things too heavy for 8-year-old ears. I got into a fight with my dad today, Rachel said, her voice tight with frustration. About what he wants me to join the company, officially. Says I've proven myself with the scholarship program and the shelter partnerships, and now it's time to take on real responsibility. And you don't want to... I don't know what I want. Rachel set her coffee down, her hands restless. Part of me thinks he's right. That I could do more good with institutional resources behind me. But another part feels like I'd be giving up the work I actually care about for the work he thinks I should care about. Daniel thought about his own transition from maintenance supervisor to facilities director, about how terrified he'd been that accepting the promotion would somehow mean betraying who he was. What does your gut say? My gut says I'm scared. Scared of disappointing him again. Scared of choosing wrong. Scared of waking up in 10 years and realizing I've built a life I don't actually want. That's a lot of scared. Rachel laughed, but it came out shaky. You know what the therapist I'm seeing said? She said I'm still processing the trauma of the accident, that near-death experiences can make you question everything about your life, about your choices, about who you want to be. Is she right? Probably. Rachel pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. I keep thinking about those 30 seconds before you pulled me out. I was conscious for some of it, trapped and terrified, and convinced I was going to die. And all I could think was that I'd wasted so much time. On things that didn't matter. On making my father happy instead of making myself happy. She looked at Daniel with eyes that held too much understanding for someone who'd lived 26 years. You risked your life for me. You almost left Emma an orphan. For what? So I could go back to wasting my second chance on corporate meetings and quarterly reports. Is that what you think you'd be doing? I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know if I'm running toward something that matters or away from something that scares me. Daniel thought about Laura, about the conversations they'd had about purpose and meaning, about building a life versus just living one. What did you want to be when you were Emma's age? Rachel smiled at the memory. A therapist. I used to set up my stuffed animals in a circle and counsel them about their problems. My mom thought it was hilarious. So you've always wanted to help people. Always. But then my mum died and my dad needed me. And somewhere along the way, helping people became about making him happy instead of following my own path. Maybe it can be both, Daniel suggested. Maybe you don't have to choose between your father's approval and your own purpose. Maybe there's a way to do meaningful work within the company structure. You think so? I think you're smart enough to figure it out. And brave enough to demand what you need rather than just accepting what you're offered. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then, how did you know that helping me was the right choice? Even though it meant risking Emma's future, I didn't know. Daniel's honesty felt important. I just knew I couldn't live with myself if I drove past. Couldn't look Emma in the eye and tell her to be brave if I wasn't willing to be brave myself. Even if being brave meant she might lose you. Even then, because teaching her to choose right over easy seemed more important than teaching her to choose safety over conscience. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. You gave me my life back, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it. You're doing it, Daniel said firmly. Every Thursday you come here and have dinner with us. Every week you show up at the shelter and read to kids who need to see that broken adults can still be whole. Every day you choose to keep living instead of just surviving. That's what you do with a second chance. You live it. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who've earned each other's trust. Daniel thought about how strange it was, this friendship that had grown from trauma. How Rachel had gone from stranger to family in the space of a few months. Can I tell you something? Rachel asked. Anything. I was so lost before the accident. Had everything felt nothing, going through the motions of life without actually living. She paused, gathering courage. Then I woke up in that hospital and learned a stranger had risked everything for me, and it broke something open. Made me realize I'd been wasting my life, playing it safe, never taking risks because I was so afraid of disappointing my father or failing or just being human. And now I'm terrified, but I'm also alive in a way I wasn't before. Like the accident burned away all the parts of me that were just performing, and what's left is rawer but more real. Daniel understood exactly what she meant. That's how I felt after Laura died. Like grief stripped away everything superficial and left only what actually mattered. Is that why we work? Rachel's voice was quiet. Why we understand each other, because we both know what it's like to be broken and have to figure out how to rebuild, maybe. Or maybe some people are just meant to be in each other's lives, meant to help each other heal. Meant to remind each other that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. The sound of small feet on the hallway floor interrupted them. Emma appeared in her pajamas, dragging her rabbit behind her, sleep-tousled and adorable. Can't sleep. Had a dream, Emma said, climbing onto the couch between them. Not a bad one. A good one. About Mummy. Yeah, Daniel pulled her close. What was she doing? She was smiling. At you and Rachel and me. And she said to tell you she's proud. Emma yawned, already drifting back toward sleep. Said you're doing good, all of us. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. After Emma had fallen asleep between them, she whispered, Do you believe that? That Laura's really proud. Yeah, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I really do. Because what else could you believe when your 8-year-old delivered messages of approval from beyond? When the work you were doing felt right in your bones, when broken people were finding ways to heal together. Rachel eventually left, driving home under stars that seemed brighter than usual. Daniel carried Emma back to bed, tucked her in with her rabbit, and stood for a long moment looking at the photos on her wall. Laura's laughing face, Emma's drawings of their growing family, the height marks that tracked growth and change and survival. We're doing okay, he whispered to Laura's picture. Me and Emma, Rachel and Robert, all the kids at the shelter. We're choosing courage over fear, connection over isolation, healing over hiding. I hope that's what you would have wanted. The photo didn't answer, but Daniel didn't need it to. He could feel Laura's presence in the choices he made, in the daughter they'd raised, in the life he was building from the ashes of loss. Some nights the grief was still overwhelming. Some days he still forgot for a moment that she was gone and turned to tell her something before remembering. But those moments were getting farther apart, replaced by gratitude for the time they'd had and hope for the time that lay ahead. Love doesn't replace love, he'd learned. It just keeps expanding, creating space for more light, more connection, more reasons to choose courage, even when fear feels safer. And that was Laura's real legacy. Not in photographs or memories, but in the continuing choice to love deeply, despite knowing how much loss could hurt. To show up even when hiding felt easier, to be brave in both big ways and small. One Thursday dinner at a time. One child helped at the shelter. One conversation that healed instead of harmed. One day at a time, they were all learning how to live again instead of just survive. And sometimes Daniel thought, as he finally climbed into bed, sometimes that was enough. Emma turned 9 on a Saturday morning in September, exactly 2 years and 3 months after Laura died. It was the first birthday Daniel didn't dread, the first one, where joy outweighed grief, and he chose to see that as progress rather than betrayal. The apartment smelled like chocolate and vanilla evidence of Daniel's attempt at making a homemade cake. It was lopsided, and the frosting was melting slightly, but Emma had specifically requested that Daddy make the cake, not buy one, so here it was, imperfect and made with love. Rachel arrived at 8 in the morning with her arms full of balloons and wrapped presents and a bakery box that probably contained something that would put Daniel's cake to shame, but she'd been thoughtful enough to bring it in an unmarked box so Emma wouldn't know. "You remembered," Emma squealed, launching herself at Rachel for a hug. "Remembered what you said you'd come early to help Daddy not burn breakfast. Someone has to supervise." Rachel grinned at Daniel over Emma's head. "Can't trust him alone in the kitchen on special occasions." "I can hear you," Daniel said. But he was smiling. The kitchen had become crowded in the best way, 3 of them moving around each other with the practiced ease of people who'd done this dance before. Emma directed operations with the seriousness of a general commanding troops. "Rachel, you mix the batter. Daddy, you can watch and hand us things. But don't cook. You love me, but you burn everything." "This is my kitchen," Daniel protested without heat. "And Rachel and I are saving it from your cooking." Emma's logic was unassailable. They made chocolate chip pancakes shaped like stars because Rachel had brought a star-shaped cookie cutter, and Emma declared it perfect. Only slightly burnt around the edges, which Daniel took as a personal victory. Guests started arriving at 11. Beth and her kids. Tom Reynolds from work, who'd brought a toy tool set with a card that said, "So you can fix things like your dad." Patricia from the shelter with Lily. And Robert Bennett, who stood awkwardly by the doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged at a child's birthday party. Emma noticed him immediately and crossed the room to take his hand. "Hi, Mr. Bennett. Want to see my rock collection?" Robert looked startled, then pleased. "I would love to see your rock collection." She led him to her room, this CEO who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, and showed him rocks she'd collected from parking lots and parks and beaches, told him the story of each one with the seriousness they deserved. "This one's from the park where Mommy used to take me. This one's from the beach last summer with Daddy. This one Rachel gave me. She says it's for courage." Robert picked up the courage stone, turning it over in his hand. "Rachel told me about you. Said you're very brave. Well, I learned from the best." Emma pointed to Laura's photo on her nightstand. "That's my mummy. And that's my daddy. And now I have Rachel too, so I'm learning from 3 best people." "You're very lucky." "I know," Emma said simply. "Then, are you lonely?" "Mr. Bennett?" The question caught Robert off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes you look sad, like you're missing someone." "Is it Rachel's mom?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I miss her very much." "Me too." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. "I miss my mum every day, but Daddy says missing someone means they were really important, and that's okay. Your daddy's a wise man." "The wisest." Emma smiled. "Want to come see my cake? Daddy made it, and it's kind of crooked, but he tried really hard." Robert followed her back to the party, and Daniel noticed his eyes were red, but his smile was genuine. Whatever Emma had said to him in those few minutes alone had cracked something open. The cake ritual came with 9 candles and wildly off-key singing. Emma closed her eyes tight, made her wish, and blew out all the candles in one breath. Lily asked what she'd wished for. Can't tell, or it won't come true. But I can say I'm really happy. The living room became organized chaos as Emma opened presents. Beth had brought art supplies, more markers and sketch pads, and the fancy-colored pencils Emma had been coveting. Tom's tool set was a hit. Patricia gave her a journal for writing feelings. Lily presented a friendship bracelet she'd made herself, all colorful threads braided together. Robert hesitated before presenting his gift. It was a small box carefully wrapped. Emma opened it to find a silver locket on a delicate chain. "Oh," the word came out breathless. "It's beautiful." "It was my daughter's when she was your age," Robert said quietly. "You can put pictures inside, of people you love." Emma threw her arms around his legs in a hug that nearly knocked him over. "Thank you, Mr. Bennet. Can you help me put pictures in it?" They sat on the couch together. This powerful CEO and a 9-year-old girl carefully selecting which photos would fit in the tiny locket. One side got Laura's smiling face. The other side got Daniel. "Now they're both close to my heart," Emma explained, snapping the locket shut with satisfaction. Daniel watched Robert's face transform, watched years of emotional distance begin to crack under the force of a child's uncomplicated affection. When Robert looked up, his eyes met Daniel's across the room, and Daniel saw gratitude and understanding and something like peace. Rachel's gift came last. Another book, but this one was blank. Empty pages. Emma asked, puzzled. "It's for us to write our story," Rachel explained. "Every week at the shelter we can write about the kids we help, the things we learn. So someday you can look back and remember how strong you were, how much you helped others." Emma hugged the book to her chest. Best present ever. After the party wound down and most guests had left, Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen with Rachel and Robert watching through the doorway as Emma showed Lily her new locket. "She's remarkable," Robert said quietly. "Your daughter. She gets it from Laura. She gets it from both of you," Rachel corrected. "She's learned compassion from watching you be compassionate, learned courage from watching you be brave, learned that helping others matters more than staying safe." Robert cleared his throat, emotion thick in his voice. "I wanted to thank you, Daniel, for today, for letting me be part of this. I haven't been to a child's birthday party since Rachel was 12. I'd forgotten what it felt like." "You're welcome here any time," Daniel said and meant it. After Robert left, after Beth had taken her tired kids home, after Lily's grandmother had picked her up, it was just Daniel, Emma and Rachel sitting among the wrapping paper and empty cake plates and evidence of a day well celebrated. "Best birthday ever?" Daniel asked Emma. "Best birthday since Mommy was alive," Emma said honestly. "Then is it okay that I'm happy? Even though Mommy's not here?" Rachel knelt down to Emma's level. "Can I tell you something your dad told me once?" Emma nodded. "Being happy doesn't mean you've forgotten someone. It means they loved you enough to want you to be happy even when they're gone. Your mom wouldn't want you to stop celebrating. She'd want you to have the best birthday ever every year because she loved you that much. You think so. I know so." That night, after Rachel had gone home and Emma was asleep with her new locket around her neck, Daniel sat in the quiet living room surrounded by the happy chaos of the day. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photo he'd taken Emma blowing out her candles, her face bright with joy, surrounded by people who loved her. He sent it to Rachel with the text, "Thank you for today, for everything." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for letting me be part of your family, for teaching me what family means." Daniel looked at Laura's photo on the wall. We did good today, didn't we? Emma was happy, really genuinely happy. That's what you wanted, right? For her to have a childhood full of love and laughter and people who show up for her. The photo smiled back, frozen in a moment of joy that Daniel was learning to honor by creating new moments of joy. Laura would have loved today, would have loved Rachel's friendship, would have loved seeing Emma surrounded by chosen family and biological family and all the people who'd come together around one broken man's choice to stop instead of drive past. Love grows, Daniel thought. That's what Laura used to say. Love doesn't divide or diminish. It just keeps growing, creating space for more and more light. And in the expanding space of their lives, there was room now for Rachel's friendship, for Robert's awkward attempts at being present for the children at the shelter, who Emma helped heal for the scholarship recipients, who carried Laura's name into their futures. Room for grief and joy to coexist, for memory and new experience to live side by side, for the past to be honored while the future unfolded. Emma's 9th birthday had been a celebration not just of her life, but of all their lives, of survival and growth, and the courage to keep choosing love even when loss had taught them how much love could hurt. And that Daniel thought as he finally headed to bed was the best gift he could give his daughter. Not protection from pain, but the knowledge that pain was survivable, that joy was possible even after tragedy. That family wasn't just the people you were born to, but the people who showed up when it mattered. Emma had learned those lessons well, and in teaching her, Daniel had learned them himself. 6 months after the accident, Robert Bennett appeared at Daniel's office, which was still strange to say. Daniel's office. He had an office now with a door and a window, and his name on a placard. Facilities Director. Some mornings he still expected to wake up and find it had all been a dream. "We need to talk," Robert said, and Daniel's stomach dropped with old instincts that said those words never led anywhere good. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay." Robert sat in the visitor's chair looking less like a CEO and more like an excited father. "I want to give you something at the annual gala. You've already given me too much." "This is different." Robert leaned forward. "We're establishing a new award, the Paramount Courage Award for extraordinary acts of bravery and service to others. The first recipient will be you." Daniel's mouth went dry. "Mr. Bennett, I can't. I didn't do it for recognition." "I know." Rachel's voice came from the doorway where she'd appeared with perfect timing. "That's exactly why you should accept." She came into the office, moving without her cane, now the cast finally off her arm. "You need to understand something, Daniel. It's not about you. It's about showing other people that ordinary individuals can do extraordinary things. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway." "I have to give a speech." Daniel felt panic rising. "In front of 500 people, I fix heating units. I don't give speeches. You'll do fine." Rachel smiled. "I'll help you write it. And Emma can come. She'll want to see her dad get an award." At Emma's name, Daniel's resistance wavered. She would want to be there, would probably talk about it for weeks, would wear her best dress and sit in the front row, bursting with pride. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Okay, I'll do it." Over the next week, Daniel and Rachel sat together crafting his speech. Emma helped by drawing pictures of her daddy on stage and making sure they remembered to include the important parts of the story. "You have to tell them about thinking of me in the fire," Emma insisted. "About how love made you brave." "That's the best part." Daniel tried to write something formal, something that sounded like what he imagined award acceptance speeches should sound like. Rachel kept crossing it out. "Just tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them you were scared. Tell them you thought about Emma. Tell them you made a choice between safety and doing what was right. That's the story people need to hear." The tuxedo fitting was an experience Daniel never wanted to repeat. The formal wear shop had mirrors everywhere reflecting back a man Daniel barely recognized. He looked like someone playing dress-up an imposter in expensive clothes. "You look like James Bond," Emma declared, circling him with critical eyes. "James Bond doesn't fix HVAC units," Daniel muttered. "Maybe he should," Emma said with perfect 9-year-old logic, making Daniel laugh despite his discomfort. Rachel insisted Emma needed a dress too, for such an important night. They found one in blue with sparkles that made Emma twirl in front of the changing room mirror. "Daddy, do I look fancy?" "You look beautiful, just like your mom." Emma stopped mid-twirl, her expression serious. "Like Mommy." Daniel knelt down, his throat tight. "Just like her. She would have loved this dress on you. I wish she could see us." Emma's voice was small. "Wish she could be there when you get your award." "She'll be there, sweetheart. She's always watching." The night before the gala, Daniel couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment rehearsing his speech for the 100th time, each word feeling inadequate to capture what had happened that day on Highway 36. Rachel showed up at 11 with coffee and determination. She'd stayed over to help Emma get ready in the morning, but she found Daniel on the couch, his speech notes scattered around him, his face tight with anxiety. "Can't sleep, terrified." Of the gala, of standing on a stage pretending I'm something special, of people thinking I'm a hero when I just did what needed doing. Rachel sat beside him, picking up his note cards. "Can I tell you something? What before the accident, I was lost. Had everything money could buy, but I felt empty, going through motions of life without actually living. I did charity work to fill the void, but my heart wasn't really in it. I was just existing." She turned to face him. "Then I woke up in that hospital and learned a stranger had risked everything to save my life. And it changed me, made me realize I wasn't living. I was just surviving, that I'd been wasting my one precious life on things that didn't matter." Rachel took his scarred hand in hers. "You didn't just save my life that day. You taught me how to actually live it, how to show up, how to be present, how to choose courage over comfort. That's not nothing, Daniel. That's everything. You give me too much credit. No, you don't take enough." Rachel's voice was firm. "You're raising a daughter alone while working full-time. You write her love notes every day. You volunteer at a shelter. You started a scholarship fund in your wife's memory. You're not just a hero for 30 seconds on a highway. You're a hero every single day." They sat in the comfortable silence of friendship that had grown from trauma into something deeper, something that felt like family. "Rachel, yeah, thank you for being here. For Emma, for me, for making this all feel less scary. Always." The morning of the gala arrived with autumn sunshine and Emma's boundless excitement. She'd woken at dawn, too keyed up to sleep, and had been bouncing around the apartment ever since. Rachel helped Emma with her hair, braiding it with flowers woven through because Emma had seen it in a video and declared it perfect. Daniel watched them together, this woman who'd become like family and his daughter who'd learned to trust again and felt overwhelming gratitude. "You nervous, Daddy?" Emma asked as Rachel finished the braid. Terrified. "That's okay." Emma climbed into his lap with 9-year-old grace. "Remember what we practiced. Speak from the heart. Tell them about love and bravery. And don't forget to breathe. When did you become the parent I've been practicing?" Emma's smile was pure mischief. The Denver Art Museum had been transformed for the gala, elegant in a way that made Daniel feel even more out of place. 500 people in evening gowns and tuxedos, champagne glasses catching the light. The elite of Denver's business community gathered to celebrate success. Daniel wanted to disappear, wanted to go back to his small apartment and his normal life and his anonymity. But Emma's hand was in his, her face bright with pride, and he couldn't let her down. Backstage waiting for his name to be called. Daniel's hands shook. Emma straightened his bow tie with the seriousness she brought to important tasks. "You ready for this?" "Not even a little bit." Emma's expression shifted to something older than her years. "Remember what we talked about. You're not doing this for you. You're doing it so other people know it's okay to be brave. That being scared doesn't mean you can't help." Rachel appeared with a folded piece of paper. "In case you forget what to say. But you won't need it because you already know." Daniel unfolded it, a single line in Rachel's handwriting. "You taught me that heroes are people who show up when it costs everything." He looked up at Rachel, at Emma, at these two people who'd become his anchor in the storm. "Okay, I can do this." The lights dimmed. Robert's voice carried across the ballroom, beginning to tell the story of the accident. The crash, the fire, the choice. The audience fell silent, hundreds of people listening to Daniel's worst and best moment laid bare. Emma slipped her hand into his. "Daddy, are you scared, terrified?" "That's okay. Heroes can be scared. That's what makes them brave. Like Mommy said, angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have brave hearts." Daniel's name was called. The applause started growing into a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. But Daniel only had eyes for Emma, beaming with pride in the front row, and Laura's photo he'd tucked into his pocket, the woman who'd taught him that love means showing up even when you're terrified. He walked on stage to face 500 strangers and tell them the truth about courage, about fear, about the 30 seconds that had changed everything. And as the spotlight hit him, Daniel thought, "I can do this. For Emma, for Laura, for Rachel, for all the people who need to know that ordinary people can be extraordinary when it matters most." He stepped up to the podium, took a breath, and began to speak. The podium felt like an island. 500 faces stared up at Daniel, expectant and attentive, and for a moment his mind went completely blank. The speech he'd rehearsed 100 times evaporated like morning fog. Then he saw Emma in the front row, giving him a thumbs up with both hands, her face split wide with a grin. Beside her, Rachel nodded encouragement, and in his pocket, Laura's photo seemed to radiate warmth against his chest. Daniel took a breath and began. 6 months ago, I was driving to work, thinking about picking up my daughter from school, about what to make for dinner, about paying rent. Normal things. Ordinary things. The kind of thoughts everyone has on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Then I saw a car crash, a silver Mercedes spinning out of control on Highway 36, and I had a choice. Drive past, get to work on time. Stay safe. Or stop. His voice steadied as he spoke. The audience leaned forward. I thought about my daughter, Emma. She'd already lost her mother 2 years ago to a brain aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. One day Laura was here, the next she was gone. And Emma was 8 years old, alone in the world except for me. Daniel's hands gripped the podium edge. I thought about what would happen if I stopped, if I went to help and something went wrong. Emma would be an orphan, completely alone. And I almost drove past, almost chose safety. But then I thought about what my wife Laura would want me to teach our daughter. Would she want me to teach Emma that your own safety matters more than someone else's life, that you look away when people need help? He shook his head. Or would she want me to show Emma that love means showing up, even when you're terrified, especially when you're terrified? Daniel looked directly at Emma. My wife died 2 years ago, and for 2 years I've been trying to honor her memory by being the kind of father she'd be proud of, by teaching Emma to be kind, brave, compassionate, by showing her that the values we claim to hold actually matter when they're tested. That morning on Highway 36, I could hear Laura's voice telling me what mattered. Not my safety, but my daughter's character, the person she'll become, the lessons she'll carry, the kind of woman she'll grow into. He held up his scarred hands. I went into that fire thinking about you, sweetheart, praying I'd come home to you. And yes, I got hurt. Yes, I have scars. But these scars taught you something important. They taught you that helping people matters, that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's loving people more than you fear the consequences. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. That's the lesson your mother wanted you to learn. And I'd earn these scars 1,000 times to teach you that, to show you that when someone needs help, we don't calculate the cost. We just help. He turned to address the full audience. This award has my name on it, but it really belongs to every person who's ever stopped when they could have driven past, who's ever helped when they could have looked away, who's ever chosen courage over comfort. We're all capable of this. Every single one of us has 30 seconds of courage inside us. The question isn't whether we're capable, it's whether we'll use that courage when it matters, whether we'll choose to see people who need help, whether we'll show up even when it's hard. Daniel gestured to the screen behind him, where Laura's photo had appeared, her smile radiant and alive. My wife Laura used to say that love is like light. You can't contain it. It spreads, touches everything, changes everything. That morning I thought I was just saving one person. I didn't know I was starting something bigger. Robert stepped forward, joining Daniel at the podium. Tonight we're announcing the Laura Morrison Memorial Scholarship Fund for children who've lost parents, because we cannot bring back those we've lost, but we can honor them by helping others who grieve, by teaching Daniel's lesson that love means showing up. The screen filled with Laura's photo, then images of scholarship recipients, children whose lives had been changed by the program. Daniel's throat tightened, seeing their faces, knowing Laura would have loved this. The standing ovation was deafening. Daniel stood there overwhelmed, his scarred hands gripping the crystal award Robert had presented. But he wasn't thinking about the applause or the recognition. He was thinking about Emma's pride, about Laura's legacy, about Rachel's second chance, about all the ripples spreading outward from 30 seconds of choice. Backstage, Emma launched herself at him with such force he nearly dropped the award. You did it, Daddy. You weren't even scared, I was terrified. But you did it anyway. That's what brave means. Emma's logic was unassailable. Rachel appeared, her eyes bright with tears. That was beautiful. Thank you for reminding me why it mattered. For what? For giving purpose to the scars. For helping me honor Laura. For showing me that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People approached to shake Daniel's hand, to share their own stories of courage, to thank him for reminding them that heroism wasn't reserved for fictional characters. Tom Reynolds was there, grinning like a proud parent. Beth cried and hugged him so tight he couldn't breathe. Patricia from the shelter told him that 3 more families had contacted them about the scholarship program just tonight. But the moment Daniel would remember most came at the end of the night. Emma had fallen asleep against Rachel's shoulder, exhausted from excitement. Daniel carefully lifted his daughter, feeling her warm weight in his arms, breathing in the strawberry scent of her hair. Robert approached quietly. Thank you, he said simply, for saving my daughter, for teaching me what it means to be present, for showing me that success isn't measured in quarterly reports, but in the lives we touch. Daniel adjusted Emma's weight. Thank you for giving me the chance to honor Laura, for helping me turn tragedy into something meaningful. That's what you taught me, Robert said, that we honor those we've lost by living in a way that's worthy of their love, by being the kind of people they'd be proud to know. After Robert left, Rachel walked with Daniel to his car. Emma stirred slightly but didn't wake as Daniel settled her into the back seat. She's going to talk about this for weeks, Rachel said, smiling. Probably months. They stood in the parking lot, the Denver night cool around them, the weight of the evening settling into something quieter. Daniel, yeah. I'm proud of you. For what you said tonight. For your courage not just on the highway, but every day. For being the kind of father Emma deserves. The kind of friend I needed. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I'm proud of you too. For using your second chance to help others. For teaching Emma about bravery. For becoming family when we needed family most. Rachel hugged him, careful of his still healing scars. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for teaching me how to live mine. As Daniel drove home through quiet streets, Emma sleeping peacefully in the back seat, he thought about the journey from that terrible morning to this proud night. About how 30 seconds had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. About how choosing courage over comfort had transformed not just his life, but the lives of everyone connected to that choice. He pulled Laura's photo from his pocket at a red light, studying her frozen smile. We did good tonight, he whispered. Emma was so proud. The scholarship fund is real. Rachel's helping kids heal. We're honoring your memory in a way that matters. The light turned green. Daniel tucked the photo back into his pocket and drove toward home, toward the life he and Emma were building, toward the future that Laura's love had made possible even in her absence. Some nights the grief was still overwhelming. Some days he still reached for his phone to call her before remembering. But those moments were growing fewer, replaced by gratitude for what had been, and hope for what was becoming. The award sat on the passenger seat, crystal-catching streetlight, but the real award was sleeping peacefully in back, this daughter he'd raised through grief, this remarkable child who understood that love meant showing up even when it hurt. And in showing up for her every single day, Daniel had learned to show up for himself, to believe he was worthy of second chances and new connections and the expanding family that had grown from the ashes of loss. Love doesn't replace love, he'd learned. It just keeps spreading, touching everything, changing everything exactly like Laura said. And that was worth every scar. 1 year later, Daniel's new office had a corner view and his name on the door, Daniel Morrison, Vice President of Community Outreach. The position Robert had created specifically for him, designed to combine his practical knowledge of the company with his passion for helping people. The walls were covered with Emma's artwork, her drawings from the shelter pictures of families healing rainbows over children holding hands. Laura's photo sat on his desk beside the Crystal Courage Award, both of them reminders of why this work mattered. Emma was 10 now, thriving in ways Daniel had barely dared to hope for 2 years ago. The nightmares had stopped. Her smile came easily. She still carried grief, still had moments when Laura's absence hit her fresh and sharp. But she'd learned to carry the missing alongside the joy. She'd started a helpers club at school, organizing students to volunteer at shelters and nursing homes. When adults asked why, she'd say, simply, "My daddy taught me that helping people matters. That's what heroes do." The scholarship fund had grown beyond anything Daniel had imagined. 30 families supported this year, with applications coming from across Colorado. Each one made him cry reading stories of loss and resilience, seeing Laura's name connected to real children getting real help. Thursday dinners remained sacred. Rachel still arrived at 6 with yellow flowers, and Emma still set the table with careful attention to which plate Rachel preferred. They'd moved to a bigger apartment now, one that could accommodate their growing chosen family, but the tradition stayed the same. Robert visited weekly, bringing books for Emma and stories about Margaret that he'd finally learned to share. His relationship with Rachel had transformed over the past year, walls coming down brick by brick as they learned to talk about grief instead of avoiding it. On this particular Thursday, they were celebrating. The shelter's new wing, the Laura Morrison Memorial Healing Center, was opening next week, a dedicated space for grief counseling, art therapy, and the kind of healing work that Rachel had made her life's mission. Emma helped Daniel make spaghetti. Her technique much improved from a year ago. She could chop vegetables now, stir sauce without splattering thyme the pasta perfectly. Small skills that marked growth and capability. "Daddy, do you ever regret it?" Emma asked suddenly, her knife pausing mid-carrot. "Regret what, sweetheart? Getting hurt to save Rachel." "Do you ever wish you'd driven past Daniel?" Set down the wooden spoon and gave her question the weight it deserved. Never. Not once. Even though it was scary, especially because it was scary. Because now you know that your daddy is brave enough to do hard things, to help people, to choose right over easy, and that's who I want you to be too. Emma nodded slowly, processing. "I think Mommy's proud. Of both of us. Why's that? Because we're not just surviving anymore. We're living, and helping other people live too. That's what love does, right? Makes more love." Daniel pulled her into a hug. This miracle child who understood everything that mattered. "Yeah, baby. That's exactly what love does." Rachel arrived right on time, arms full of flowers and news. "Patricia says we have 15 new families on the waiting list for the healing center. We're going to need to expand already." "That's good news," Daniel said, though privately he worried about scaling up too fast. Robert followed minutes later looking more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen him. He'd started taking Fridays off to spend time with Rachel, making up for years of absence with consistent presence now. Over dinner, Emma chatted about the science fair, about her friend's birthday party, about the new girl at school who'd just lost her grandmother, and how Emma had invited her to come to the shelter. Natural and easy talking about grief and help and connection, like they were ordinary topics. After Emma was asleep, the adults sat on the porch with coffee, the Denver skyline glittering in the distance. "It's been a year," Rachel said quietly. "Since the gala. Since everything became official." "Best year of my life," Robert said. Then paused. "No, that's not right. The most meaningful year. The one where I finally figured out what matters." "Which is," Daniel prompted. "This." Robert gestured to encompass the porch, the apartment, the people gathered there. "Being present. Showing up. Knowing my daughter not as an employee or an obligation, but as a person I genuinely enjoy spending time with." Rachel took her father's hand, and Daniel saw years of pain and distance beginning to heal. "You know what I realized," Rachel said. "That morning when I was trapped in that car, convinced I was going to die, I wasn't thinking about my degree or my future career or anything I'd accomplished. I was thinking about all the moments I'd wasted. All the times I'd been physically present but emotionally absent." She looked at Daniel. "You gave me the chance to stop wasting moments, to be fully present, to do work that matters not because it looks good on paper, but because it actually helps people." Daniel thought about the journey from that terrible morning to this peaceful night. About how much had changed, how much had healed, how much had grown. "Laura would have loved this," he said. "All of you sitting here, the work we're doing, the way we've built family from loss. She'd be proud." Robert agreed. "Of all of us, but especially of Emma. That child has more wisdom than most adults I know. She gets it from good teachers." Rachel smiled at Daniel. "She learns by watching you be brave every day. Not the dramatic kind of brave, but the showing up kind. The doing the hard work kind. The choosing connection over isolation kind. That's the best kind," Robert said. "The kind that actually changes lives." They sat in comfortable silence, 3 people connected by tragedy and choice and the slow work of healing. Daniel thought about the Laura Morrison Memorial Healing Center opening next week, about the families it would help, about the ripples still spreading from 30 seconds of courage. His phone buzzed. A text from Beth. Saw the news about the healing center. "Laura would be so proud. You're doing it, little brother. You're honoring her in the best way possible. Daniel showed the text to Rachel and Robert. They smiled, understanding without words what it meant to honor the dead by serving the living. The anniversary, Daniel said. Of the accident. It's next week. I know, Rachel said softly. I've been thinking about it. About what I want to say to you, to Emma, to everyone who's been part of this journey. What do you want to say? That I'm grateful. Not for the accident, but for what came after. For the choice you made. For the family we've become. For learning that sometimes the worst days lead to the best things if we're brave enough to keep showing up. Robert cleared his throat, emotion thick in his voice. I want to say thank you. For giving me more time with my daughter. For teaching me what it means to be a father. For showing me that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become the person you should have been all along. Daniel felt tears building. You don't have to thank me. You've given us everything. The job, the scholarship fund, the healing center. You've made Laura's legacy real. No, Robert said firmly. You made Laura's legacy real. I just provided resources. You provided the vision, the heart, the understanding of what these families actually need. That's not something money can buy. The Denver night was cool autumn starting to turn toward winter. Inside, Emma slept peacefully, her dreams untroubled by nightmares. On the walls, her artwork documented a year of healing, of growth, of learning, that broken things could be made whole. Daniel thought about the journey ahead. The healing center opening. More families to help. More children to teach that grief was survivable. More work to do in Laura's name, honoring her memory by serving others the way she always had. It wasn't the life he'd planned. Laura was supposed to be here, supposed to grow old with him, supposed to watch Emma grow up. But loss had taught him that life rarely went according to plan. That sometimes the universe broke things open in terrible ways, that somehow impossibly led to beautiful things. 30 seconds had changed everything. One choice had rippled outward, touching lives in ways he was still discovering. And the work wasn't done. Would probably never be done. There would always be more families who needed help. More children who needed to know they weren't alone. More opportunities to choose courage over comfort. But tonight, sitting on the porch with friends who'd become family, knowing Emma slept safe and loved, seeing the tangible proof that suffering could be transformed into service, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Complete peace. Not the absence of grief. He would always miss Laura, but peace in knowing he was living in a way that honored her. That the choice he'd made that morning on Highway 36 had been right. That courage compounded, spreading outward in ripples that touched more lives than he could count. Thank you, he said to Rachel and Robert, for being part of this, for showing up, for choosing us as family. Thank you for saving my life, Rachel said, for teaching me how to actually live it. Thank you for saving mine, Robert added, for reminding me what matters. They raised their coffee cups in a quiet toast. To Laura, Daniel said. To Margaret, Robert added. To second chances, Rachel finished. And to all the people, their courage would help heal in the years to come. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table and pulled out Laura's coffee mug from the cabinet. He made himself coffee and drank from her mug, something he'd done many times now since that first night after the gala. He looked at Laura's photo on the mantel. 3 years, he told her. 3 years since the accident. And look at what we've built. Look at Emma, how she's thriving. Look at all the lives we've touched in your name. The photo smiled back, eternal and unchanging. I miss you every single day. But I'm learning that missing you doesn't have to mean my life stops. That I can honor your memory by living fully. Not by staying stuck in grief. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Today was perfect. Laura would be so proud. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. Thank you for choosing us. Daniel typed back. For showing Emma what strength looks like. For being exactly who we needed. Because that was the final truth he'd learned. Family wasn't just biology. It was choice. It was showing up. It was choosing each other day after day, year after year, through joy and grief and everything in between. Daniel looked around the apartment at Emma's artwork covering the walls, at the photos documenting their journey, at all the evidence that life continued despite loss. That love persisted despite death. That courage compounded, creating more courage, more love, more healing than anyone could measure. 30 seconds had changed everything. One choice had rippled outward for 3 years and counting. And the work wasn't finished. Would never be finished. There would always be more families to help more children to heal, more opportunities to choose courage. But tonight, Daniel allowed himself to feel complete, to acknowledge that while the grief would never fully disappear, it had been joined by joy, by purpose, by the knowledge that suffering could be transformed into service. Laura's legacy lived on, not just in Emma's face or the scholarship fund or the healing center, but in every act of courage they inspired, every family they helped, every child who learned that grief was survivable and love was endless. That was worth every scar, worth every moment of fear, worth the choice that had seemed impossible in the moment, but had proven to be the most impotent decision of his life. Love you to the moon. Daniel whispered to Laura's photo one more time, and in his heart, where she would always live. He heard her response, and back again, my love, always and forever. Friday night, just Daniel and Emma in their apartment. Rachel had plans with friends, Robert was traveling for business, and Beth had her hands full with her own kids. Just the two of them, father and daughter, the way it had been for 3 years now. Emma sat at the kitchen table finishing homework, while Daniel prepared their simple dinner. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food for a quiet night. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling, dusting Denver in white. Daddy, can I ask you something? Emma's voice carried that particular tone that meant a serious question was coming. Always, sweetheart. Do you ever feel like Mommy's really gone? Like she's not watching anymore? Daniel set down the spatula and joined her at the table. This was important. This deserved his full attention. Sometimes he admitted, sometimes I can't feel her presence at all, and it scares me. Makes me worry I'm forgetting her or that she's really just gone and not watching from anywhere. Emma nodded, relieved by his honesty. Me too. Sometimes I try really hard to remember her voice and I can't. And then I feel bad, like I'm a terrible daughter. You're the best daughter. Daniel took her hands. And you know what I think? What I think Laura isn't just one place or one feeling. She's in the way you help other kids at the shelter, in the kindness you show your friends, in the courage you have when things are scary. She's not watching from somewhere else. She's part of who you are. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You really think so? I know so. Every time you're brave or kind or compassionate, that's Laura living through you. That's how she's still here. They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes with deep understanding between two people who've walked through fire together. Can I tell you something? Emma asked. Anything. I'm glad Rachel's our friend, and Robert too. She paused, choosing words carefully. Not instead of Mommy, but like we're making more family. Like love is growing instead of shrinking. Daniel felt his throat tighten. That's exactly right, baby. Love grows. It doesn't replace anything. It just keeps expanding. Do you think Mommy would be okay with that? With us having new people in our life, I think Mommy would be thrilled. She never wanted us to stop loving just because she was gone. She'd want us to have the biggest, most love-filled life possible. Emma smiled through her tears. That's what I thought too. They ate their simple dinner, snow falling outside the window, the apartment warm and safe around them. After dishes, Emma curled up on the couch with Daniel, both of them reading her small body fitting perfectly against his side. This was the life Laura had wanted for them, Daniel thought. Not a life without pain or loss, but a life where they could hold both grief and joy, where they could miss her desperately while also being grateful for what they had, where love kept expanding instead of contracting. At 9, Emma started yawning. "Time for bed," Daniel said. "Can you tell me a story about Mommy?" Of course. In her room, surrounded by artwork and photos, and all the evidence of a childhood being lived despite loss, Emma climbed into bed with her rabbit. Daniel sat beside her, thinking about which story to share. "Did I ever tell you about the time Mommy got lost in the grocery store?" No, Emma's eyes went wide. "She'd gone to get milk, and I was waiting with you in the baby seat in the cart. You were maybe 2 years old, and we waited and waited, and finally someone came on the loudspeaker. 'Would Daniel Morrison please come to the pharmacy?' What happened?" Daniel smiled at the memory. Laura had somehow ended up in a completely different store. She'd walked through a connecting door and ended up next door without realizing it. She was standing there with milk from the wrong store, completely confused about why she couldn't find us. Emma giggled. "That's silly." It was. And when she finally found us, she was laughing so hard she was crying. Said she'd been wandering around looking for the baby food aisle for 20 minutes before she realized she was in the wrong place. "What did you do?" I kissed her and told her I loved her, even though she was terrible with directions. And she said that's why she married me, because I always knew how to find my way home. And that home was wherever we were together. Emma was quiet, processing. "I miss her." "Me too, baby, every single day. But I'm glad we have stories. They make her feel closer. That's why we keep telling them. So she stays alive in our memories, in our hearts, in the way we live our lives." Daniel kissed Emma's forehead and tucked her in. As he was leaving, she called out, "Daddy." "Yeah, thank you for being brave, for saving Rachel, for helping all those kids at the shelter, for showing me that scary things are worth doing if they help people. Thank you for being you, for teaching me that broken hearts can heal, that families can grow, that love is stronger than loss." In the living room, Daniel sat with Laura's photo, the one from their wedding day. She was laughing at something off camera, her joy captured forever in that frozen moment. "We had a good talk tonight," he told the photo. "Emma asked if you'd be okay with our new family. I told her you'd be thrilled. I hope I was right." The photo didn't answer, but Daniel could feel Laura's presence in the warm apartment, in Emma's peaceful sleep, in the life they'd built from the ruins of tragedy. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Thank you for dinner yesterday, for being family, for teaching me what that means." He typed back, "Thank you for choosing us, for showing Emma what courage looks like, for being exactly who we needed." Because that was the truth of it. They'd all saved each other. Daniel's choice to stop had saved Rachel's life. Rachel's friendship had saved Daniel and Emma from isolation. Robert's gratitude had given them security and purpose. The children at the shelter had given them all a reason to transform pain into service. It was a web of mutual salvation, each person holding the others up. No one person carrying all the weight alone. Daniel thought about the year ahead. The healing center's grand opening next week. Emma's 11th birthday in the spring. More families to help more children to heal, more work to do in Laura's name. The challenges would come. There would be hard days, moments when grief overwhelmed, times when the work felt too heavy and the loss too great. But they wouldn't face those challenges alone. They had each other, this chosen family built from courage and kindness and the determination to keep showing up. "I love you to the moon, Laura," Daniel whispered to the photo. In his heart, he heard her response as clearly as if she'd spoken aloud. And back again. "My love, always and forever." He carried that certainty to bed, to sleep, to dreams of falling snow and growing families. And all the ways that love persisted despite death, despite fear, despite everything that tried to make the world smaller. Love grew. That was Laura's greatest lesson. It just kept growing, expanding, creating space for more light, more connection, more life. And in that growth, Daniel found peace. Not the peace of forgetting or moving on, but the peace of carrying Laura with him while still moving forward. Of honoring her memory by living fully. Of building something beautiful from something broken. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One act of courage rippling outward into something larger than he'd ever imagined possible. That was enough. That was everything. 3 years later. The annual scholarship gala had become Denver's premier charity event. Daniel stood in the same ballroom watching 50 scholarship recipients celebrate their achievements. 50 children who'd lost parents who'd found support and healing through the Laura Morrison Memorial Scholarship. Emma was 12 now, tall and confident, no longer the grief-stricken 8-year-old who'd fed her father applesauce in a hospital bed. She stood on stage giving her own speech, her voice clear and strong. 3 years ago, my dad made a choice to stop when he could have driven past. He didn't know then that saving one person would help save so many more. All of us here tonight are proof that courage matters. That one brave choice creates ripples we can't imagine. The audience listened raptly as Emma spoke. Daniel felt tears building pride, overwhelming him. This remarkable child who'd taken her own pain and transformed it into compassion for others. Rachel sat beside him now, the director of community wellness at Paramount Technologies. Her work with the Healing Center had grown beyond anything they'd imagined, helping hundreds of children process grief and trauma. She'd found her purpose in those 30 seconds when Daniel pulled her from fire. Robert was in the front row, beaming like the grandfather he'd become to Emma in everything but biology. At 65, he'd stepped back from daily operations to focus on the Foundation's work, finally understanding that legacy was measured in lives touched, not dollars earned. After Emma's speech, recipients took turns sharing their stories. Lily, now 12, spoke about losing her father and finding family at the shelter. Marcus, 14, talked about the scholarship that let him attend therapy and summer camp. Each story was a testament to the ripple effects of courage, to the way one choice had spread outward, touching lives in ways Daniel never could have predicted. During the reception, Daniel found himself on the museum's terrace with Rachel and Robert watching the Denver lights twinkle below. 3 years, Rachel said softly. 3 years since the accident. Feels like a lifetime ago. And also like yesterday. Best 3 years of my life, Robert said. Learning to be a real father. Getting to know my daughter as a person. Being part of something that actually matters. Daniel thought about everything that had changed. The job, the scholarship fund, the healing center, the lives touched and transformed. But more than that, the internal changes. Learning to carry grief while still experiencing joy. Building family from tragedy. Choosing courage over comfort again and again. Emma burst onto the terrace, still energized from her speech. Daddy, Mrs. Patricia says 3 more families signed up for the program tonight. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Emma looked between the 3 adults, her expression serious. You know what I've been thinking? What's that? That morning when you saved Rachel, you thought you were just helping one person, but really you were helping all of us. Me, because I got to see my dad be brave. Rachel, because she got to live. Mr. Robert, because he got more time with his daughter. All those kids at the shelter, because the healing center exists. That's what courage does. It spreads. One person being brave gives other people permission to be brave too. Daniel pulled her into a hug. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart," Emma said, matter-of-factly. "You just keep noticing." They all laughed, the sound carrying on the night air, joy mingling with memory and hope for all that was still to come. Later, driving Emma home through quiet streets, Daniel thought about the journey. From that terrible morning on Highway 36 to this moment of peace and purpose. From broken widower, barely surviving, to someone who'd learned to thrive while honoring loss. Daddy Emma's voice was sleepy from the back seat. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think Mommy would be really proud of us, of everything we've built. I think so too, baby." Emma yawned. Not just the scholarship and the healing center, but like us. How we're still us, even though she's gone. How we still love her, but we also love new people. How we're sad sometimes, but also really happy. That's exactly what she would want. At home, Emma went straight to bed, exhausted from the excitement. Daniel stood in her doorway, watching her sleep this miracle child who'd taught him more about courage than he'd ever taught her. In the living room, he sat with Laura's photo. 3 years since the accident. And look at what we've built. Look at Emma, how she's thriving. Look at all the lives we've touched in your name. I miss you every single day. But I'm learning that missing you doesn't have to mean my life stops. That I can honor your memory by living fully, not by staying stuck in grief. Daniel looked around the apartment at Emma's artwork covering the walls, at the photos documenting their journey, at all the evidence that life continued despite loss. That love persisted despite death. That courage compounded, creating more courage, more love, more healing than anyone could measure. 30 seconds had changed everything. One choice had rippled outward for 6 years and counting. And the work wasn't finished, would never be finished. There would always be more families to help, more children to heal, more opportunities to choose courage. But tonight, Daniel allowed himself to feel complete. To acknowledge that while the grief would never fully disappear, it had been joined by joy, by purpose, by the knowledge that suffering could be transformed into service. Laura's legacy lived on. Not just in Emma's face or the scholarship fund or the healing center, but in every act of courage. They inspired every family they helped, every child who learned that grief was survivable and love was endless. That was worth every scar, worth every moment of fear, worth the choice that had seemed impossible in the moment, but had proven to be the most important decision of his life. "Love you to the moon," Daniel whispered to Laura's photo one more time. And in his heart, where she would always live, he heard her response. And back again. "My love. Always and forever." 30 seconds. That's all it took for Daniel Morrison to change everything. 30 seconds between driving past and stopping. Between safety and courage, between one life saved and hundreds transformed. Friends, if this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Daniel thought he was just saving one person that morning on Highway 36, but really he was proving something we all need to remember, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that one brave choice creates ripples we never imagined possible. That courage isn't about being fearless, it's about loving people more than we fear the cost. Hit that subscribe button and join our Soul Lift Stories family for more stories that restore your faith in humanity and remind you that heroes walk among us every single day. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the most broken moments create the most beautiful beginnings. Because sometimes when you risk everything for a stranger, you discover they were never really a stranger at all. They were family you just hadn't met yet. Thank you for watching. And remember, you never know when your 30 seconds of courage might transform not just someone else's life, but your own.